Hello, wonderful people. Welcome to the Fanfic Club, your story destination. We have an absolute treat for you today. What if Gringotts discovered Harry was heir to the Peverell-Slytherin-Gryffindor lines and magic itself crowned him king at age 11? If you're enjoying these stories, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support keeps the stories coming. With that said, let the adventure begin. Chapter 1, The Gringotts Revelation. Harry Potter hunched his shoulders as he trailed behind Hagrid's enormous form. Diagon Alley buzzed with energy around them, witches haggling over the price of beetle eyes, a group of children pressing their noses against the window of quality Quidditch supplies, and everywhere, people casting curious glances at the giant and the small boy beside him. Just one more stop, Harry, Hagrid said cheerfully. Gotta get ya some money from Gringotts. Wizard and bank, he added at Harry's blank look. Run by goblins. Harry nearly tripped over his oversized trainers. Goblins? Yeah. Clever as they come, goblins, but not the friendliest of beasts. Best stick close. They approached an imposing white building that towered over the neighboring shops. Its burnished bronze doors gleamed in the sunlight, and beside them stood, "That's a goblin," Hagrid whispered as they walked up the stone steps. Harry tried not to stare at the creature, but couldn't help noticing his clever dark eyes, pointed beard, and long fingers. The goblin bowed as they passed through the first set of doors, and Harry found himself facing another pair, silver this time, with words engraved upon them, "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed." Harry read the warning with a small shiver crawling up his spine. Two more goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and suddenly they were standing in a vast marble hall. Hundreds of goblins sat on high stools behind a long counter, some weighing coins on brass scales, others examining precious stones through eyeglasses. "Morning," said Hagrid to a free goblin. "We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe." The goblin peered over his spectacles. "You have his key, sir." "Got it here somewhere," said Hagrid, beginning to empty his pockets onto the counter, a handful of moldy dog biscuits, several live mice, and various other items before finally producing a tiny golden key. "Got it." The goblin inspected the key carefully, then froze. His long fingers trembled slightly as he turned the key over, revealing a small crest Harry couldn't make out. The goblin's eyes darted to Harry's forehead, lingering on his scar. "This key." The goblin began, then stopped. "Wait here." Without another word, he hopped down from his stool and scurried away, taking Harry's key with him. "Strange," Hagrid muttered, stuffing the contents of his pockets back where they belonged. "Never seen them act like that before." Harry shifted uncomfortably. More goblins were looking at him now, whispering to each other behind cupped hands. The minutes stretched on, and just as Hagrid was beginning to grumble about the delay, the first goblin returned, accompanied by an older, more distinguished-looking goblin wearing a suit of fine black fabric with gold threads running through it. "Mr. Potter," the new goblin said, bowing low. "I am Ragnarok, director of Gringotts. If you would please follow me to a private room. There appears to be a matter requiring your attention." Hagrid frowned. "Now see here, I'm responsible for Harry. Dumbledore's orders, the Hogwarts gamekeeper may accompany Mr. Potter, of course," Ragnarok said smoothly, though his tone suggested he found Hagrid's presence regrettable. "This way, please." Harry glanced uncertainly at Hagrid, who nodded and placed one massive hand on Harry's shoulder. "'S'all right, Harry. But any funny business," he added to Ragnarok, "and you'll have me to answer to." Ragnarok's lips thinned. "Gringotts takes its responsibilities to its clients very seriously, I assure you." They followed the goblin director through a side door and down a corridor lined with oil paintings of what Harry assumed were important goblins. Each portrait watched them pass with calculating eyes. Finally, they reached a door made of dark wood inlaid with gold, which opened at Ragnarok's touch. Inside was a circular room with a high ceiling. A large desk carved from a single piece of marble dominated the space, and behind it hung a tapestry depicting goblins and wizards signing some sort of treaty. Ragnar gestured to two chairs, one normal-sized and one that enlarged itself as Hagrid approached. Mr. Potter, Ragnar began once they were seated, placing the small golden key on the desk between them. Are you aware that this is not simply a vault key, but also bears the Potter family crest? Harry stared at the key. Now that it was closer, he could see a small design etched into the metal, a shield with what looked like a pottery wheel. No, he said quietly. I didn't know anything about my family until yesterday. Ragnar's bushy eyebrows rose. Nothing. My aunt and uncle told me my parents died in a car crash, Harry explained, feeling his cheeks heat with embarrassment. I didn't know about magic or anything until Hagrid came. Hagrid made a noise like an angry bear. Told ya, didn't I? Terrible people, those Dursleys. Ragnar's expression was unreadable, but his long fingers drummed once on the desk. I see. Then you are unaware of your heritage and position in our world beyond being the boy who lived? Harry nodded, the now familiar feeling of being adrift in a world where everyone knew more about him than he did himself washing over him again. Then I believe we should conduct an inheritance test before proceeding further. Ragnar opened a drawer and removed a sheet of parchment and a small silver knife. This is a standard procedure for orphaned heirs of old families. It will identify any vaults or properties to which you are entitled. He slid the parchment across the desk. 3 drops of blood on the parchment, if you please. Harry hesitated, looking to Hagrid for reassurance. It's all right, Hagrid said, though he looked slightly uncomfortable. Standard procedure, like he says. With trembling fingers, Harry took the knife. Just, prick my finger. Ragnar nodded. Harry took a deep breath and pressed the knife to his index finger. It was surprisingly sharp, and a bead of blood welled immediately. He held his hand over the parchment and watched as 3 drops fell onto its surface. The effect was immediate and startling. The blood didn't stain the parchment as Harry expected, instead, it seemed to sink into the material and then spread outward in thin red lines, forming words, symbols, and what looked like a family tree. Ragnar's eyes widened as he watched, his composure slipping for the first time. By the Forge Master's hammer, he whispered, leaning forward to study the expanding text. Harry tried to read the parchment upside down, but the writing was small and still forming. Beside him, Hagrid shifted uncomfortably. What is it? Harry asked, anxiety building in his chest. Is something wrong? Ragnar looked up at Harry with an expression of mingled shock and what might have been awe. Wrong? No, Mr. Potter. But unexpected, most unexpected indeed. The goblin turned the parchment around so Harry could read it. At the top, in flowing script, was his name, Harry James Potter. Below that, his parents, James Fleamont Potter and Lily Evans Potter. The lines continued backwards through generations of Potters, but what caught Harry's eye were 3 names highlighted in gold, each connected to his lineage through various branches, Peverell, Slytherin, and Gryffindor. I don't understand, Harry said, looking up at Ragnar. You, Mr. Potter, are the last living heir of 3 of the most ancient and powerful magical bloodlines in Britain. Ragnar's voice had taken on a formal, almost ceremonial tone. Through your father's line, you are heir to both the noble house of Potter and the most ancient house of Peverell. Through a distant ancestress on your mother's side, though she herself was Muggle-born, you carry the blood of Salazar Slytherin. And through another branch of the Potter family, you are heir to Godric Gryffindor himself. Hagrid made a strangled noise. That can't be right. Lily was Muggle-born through and through. Ragnar gave Hagrid a cool look. Magic often surfaces in seemingly Muggle lines that are, in fact, descended from squibs who left the wizarding world generations ago. The inheritance test does not lie. Harry's head was spinning. But what does this mean? It means, Mr. Potter, that you are entitled to not just your trust vault, but the main Potter family vault, as well as the Peverell, Slytherin, and Gryffindor vaults, assuming you can claim them. Claim them? Harry echoed. Each ancient house has protections to ensure only true heirs can access their legacies. The fact that the inheritance test recognizes your blood claim is merely the first step. Ragnar stood, his demeanor now utterly formal. With your permission, I would like to initiate the claiming ceremony immediately. Such a convergence of bloodlines is unprecedented. Harry looked to Hagrid, who seemed as lost as he felt. Should I do that now? Hagrid tugged at his beard. Dumbledore didn't say nothing about this. Just told me to help ya get some money for school supplies. Professor Dumbledore is not Mr. Potter's magical guardian, Ragnar said sharply. The Ministry assigned that role to itself after the unfortunate events of Halloween 1981, and even their claim is superseded by inheritance law when the heir reaches 11 and is capable of claiming his birthright. Harry felt a flare of annoyance. More things no one had bothered to tell him. I want to do it, he said, more firmly than he felt. I want to know about my family. Ragnar nodded, looking pleased. Excellent. Grip Hook, he called, and the door opened to reveal the goblin who had first examined Harry's key. Prepare Inheritance Hall 1 for a tri-house claiming. Alert the vault keepers of Peverell-Slytherin and Gryffindor. Grip Hook's eyes widened, but he bowed and hurried away without comment. This will take a few minutes to prepare, Ragnar informed them. In the meantime, I can explain what to expect. As Ragnar detailed the ceremony, describing the rings Harry would need to try on and the magical protections he might face, Harry found his mind wandering. Yesterday, he'd been nobody, just unwanted Harry, sleeping in a cupboard, wearing Dudley's enormous hand-me-downs. Today he was learning he was not only a wizard, but apparently the heir to important wizarding families. And of course, all of this will remain confidential until you decide otherwise, Ragnar was saying when Harry tuned back in. Hang on, Hagrid interrupted. I don't think Dumbledore would want, with all due respect, Ragnar said, in a tone suggesting he meant none whatsoever. Professor Dumbledore's wishes are irrelevant in matters of goblin banking and inheritance law. Before Hagrid could respond, the door opened and Grip Hook reappeared. Inheritance Hall 1 is prepared, Director. Excellent. Ragnar rose. Mr. Potter, if you would follow me. Mr. Hagrid, you may observe, but the ritual space itself is restricted to the claimant and goblin officials. Hagrid looked like he wanted to object but instead gave Harry an encouraging nod. I'll be right there, Harry. Don't you worry. The halls they traveled now were deeper within the bank, lined with torches that burned with blue flames. They descended several flights of stairs before reaching a set of massive gold doors inscribed with runes. 6 goblin guards stood at attention, each armed with a pike and wearing gleaming armor. Inheritance Hall 1, Ragnar announced, has not been used for a claiming of this magnitude in over 3 centuries. The guards thumped their pikes on the floor in unison, and the doors swung inward to reveal a circular chamber with a domed ceiling. The floor was inlaid with a pattern of interlocking circles made from different metals, gold, silver, and what looked like copper, though it gleamed with an unnatural reddish light. In the center where all 3 circles met stood a pedestal with 3 cushions, each holding a ring. Around the edges of the room, goblins in formal attire stood solemnly. Some held ancient-looking scrolls, others elaborate keys. An area had been designated for observers, where Hagrid now awkwardly positioned himself, looking massive among the small cluster of high-ranking goblins permitted to witness the event. Step into the center, Mr. Potter, Ragnar directed, his voice echoing in the chamber. Harry walked forward, acutely aware of every eye on him. The floor seemed to hum beneath his feet, and he felt a strange tingling sensation as he crossed each metal circle. Before you are the heir rings of the houses of Peverell, Slytherin, and Gryffindor, Ragnar explained, gesturing to the pedestal. Each will test you in its own way. If you are rejected by any, the ceremony ends. If all 3 accept you, you will then be presented with the Potter ring to confirm your status as head of that house as well. Harry nodded, mouth dry. Which one first? The order is your choice, though tradition suggests beginning with the most recent connection. Harry considered the 3 rings. The first was silver with a strange triangular symbol set with a black stone. The second was gold with a ruby in the shape of a roaring lion's head. The third was made of what appeared to be dark metal, perhaps platinum, with an emerald carved to resemble a serpent. Something drew him to the silver ring first, a faint whisper at the edge of his consciousness. "This one," he said, pointing to the ring with the triangle. "House Peverell," Ragnarok confirmed. "You may proceed." Harry picked up the ring, surprised by how light it felt. The black stone seemed to pulse with an inner light that only he could see. Following his instincts, he slipped it onto the ring finger of his right hand. Immediately, a chill ran through him, starting at his fingertips and racing up his arm. The sensation wasn't unpleasant, but strange, as though something was examining him from the inside out. The black stone glowed, and for a moment, Harry thought he saw shadows moving within it, whispering in voices just beyond his comprehension. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sensation vanished. The ring resized itself to fit his finger perfectly. "The House of Peverell acknowledges you as its heir," Ragnarok intoned. "Proceed to the next." Without hesitation, Harry reached for the gold ring with the ruby lion. This time, as his fingers closed around it, he felt warmth radiating from the metal. When he placed it on his middle finger, that warmth exploded into heat that raced through his veins like liquid fire. It wasn't painful, but powerful, a rush of courage and strength that made him stand taller. The ruby glowed, and Harry swore he heard a distant roar. The ring, too, resized to fit him. "The House of Gryffindor acknowledges you as its heir," Ragnarok announced, and a murmur ran through the watching goblins. Only the Slytherin ring remained. Harry hesitated for just a moment before picking it up. The metal was cool to the touch, and the emerald serpent seemed to watch him with tiny, glittering eyes. As he slipped it onto his index finger, a shiver ran down his spine, and he heard a faint hissing voice in his mind. "Speaker of our tongue, blood of the founder, prove your worth." Harry didn't know how to respond, but something instinctive rose within him. "I seek only what is rightfully mine," he found himself saying, though the words came out as a sibilant hiss that startled even him. The emerald flashed, and the ring adjusted to his finger. "The House of Slytherin acknowledges you as its heir," Ragnarok said, his voice now tinged with something like reverence. "All 3 ancient houses have accepted your claim." A goblin stepped forward, carrying a small box of polished wood. Inside was a 4th ring, gold with the Potter crest Harry had noticed on his vault key. "The Potter ring is yours by right of being the last of your line," Ragnarok explained. "It requires no testing." Harry took the final ring and placed it on his right thumb, where it settled comfortably. "The claiming is complete," Ragnarok declared. "Harry James Potter is now recognized as head of House Potter and heir to the most ancient and noble houses of Peverell, Gryffindor, and Slytherin." The goblins around the room bowed deeply. Harry stood awkwardly in the center of the chamber, unsure what to do next. But before Ragnarok could instruct him, something unexpected happened. The 3 circles on the floor, gold, silver, and copper, began to glow intensely. The light rose up around Harry, swirling like mist, and he felt a powerful surge of magic unlike anything he'd experienced before. The lights merged above his head, forming a crown of pure magical energy that slowly descended. "What's happening?" Harry gasped, fighting the urge to step back. Ragnarok's eyes were wide with disbelief. The convergence of the 3 bloodlines, it's triggering something ancient. The crown of light touched Harry's head and he felt a jolt like electricity. The magic seeped into him, and a portion of it streamed toward his forehead, directly to his scar. For a moment, there was searing pain, then a black, oily substance leaked from the lightning bolt mark, sizzling as it hit the floor before evaporating into nothing. The pain vanished, replaced by a sense of clarity Harry had never known. The remaining magic of the crown settled around him like a cloak before gradually fading from view, though Harry could still feel its presence, a warm weight on his shoulders and head. The chamber was utterly silent. Even Hagrid stood frozen in shock. Then, as one, every goblin in the room dropped to one knee. "All hail," Ragnock proclaimed, his voice ringing with formality, "His Magical Majesty, Harry James Potter, King of Magical Britain by right of magic and blood, ruler of the United Houses, protector of the realm." "All hail," the goblins echoed. Harry stood rooted to the spot, stunned beyond words. What? King? That can't be right." Ragnock rose slowly. "The signs are unmistakable, Your Majesty. The crown of magic has not been seen in over a millennium, not since the last magical king ruled this land. The three houses you have claimed were royal houses in ancient times, before the founding of the Wizards' Council or the Ministry. Their convergence in one heir, combined with your proven worthiness to each, has reawakened the old magic. But I don't know how to be a king," Harry protested, panic rising. "I don't know anything about the wizarding world at all." "You will learn," Ragnock assured him. "And you will have advisors." He turned to where Hagrid stood, mouth agape. "Though perhaps not those originally intended for you." Hagrid seemed to come to his senses. He stumbled forward, stopped at the edge of the metal circles, and awkwardly dropped to one knee. "Blimey, Harry," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I mean, Your Majesty. This is Dumbledore's gonna." He trailed off, clearly at a loss. Harry felt a hysterical laugh bubbling up. "Please get up, Hagrid. I'm still just Harry." "No," Ragnock said firmly. "You are not just Harry any longer. You are the first magical monarch in 1,000 years, and the implications are profound." A goblin hurried into the chamber and whispered urgently to Ragnock, whose expression grew serious. "It seems," the bank director said, "that news of the magical event is already spreading. We felt the shockwave here, but apparently it was felt throughout magical Britain. The Ministry is sending representatives." "Already?" Hagrid said nervously. "But we've only just, magic this ancient and powerful cannot be hidden," Ragnock explained. "Every magical being in Britain likely felt something, though few will understand what it meant." He turned to Harry. "We must move quickly to secure your position before others attempt to control or manipulate it." Harry's head was spinning. This morning, he'd been excited about buying school supplies. Now he was apparently a king, and people he didn't even know were already reacting. "What do I need to do?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "First, we must visit your vaults," Ragnock said. "There will be items there, grimoires, artifacts, perhaps weapons, that belong to you as ruler. Then we should establish your formal residence and begin assembling your court." "But I'm supposed to go to Hogwarts," Harry said, latching onto the one concrete plan he understood. "I'm starting in September." Ragnock considered this. Hogwarts was once the seat of magical governance before it became primarily a school. As heir to two founders, you have more right to be there than anyone. Yes, attending while establishing your rule could work to your advantage. Another goblin entered, whispering to Ragnock again. "The Ministry representatives have arrived," Ragnock announced. "And, it seems a phoenix has appeared in the bank lobby, causing quite a stir. It refuses to leave." As if summoned by these words, a flash of fire erupted in the center of the chamber. Harry stumbled back as a magnificent bird appeared, its feathers predominantly deep blue with gold tips that seemed to flicker with inner light. It was smaller than a swan but larger than any parrot Harry had seen, with intelligent eyes that fixed on him immediately. "A royal phoenix," Ragnock breathed. They were thought extinct. The phoenix trilled a musical note that seemed to vibrate through Harry's very bones. Then, to his astonishment, it flew directly to him and landed on his shoulder. Its weight was surprising, both substantial and somehow not burdensome at all. The bird bent its head and gently butted against Harry's cheek. "It seems you have your first magical retainer," Ragnock said with something like approval. "Phoenixes choose only the worthy." The magnificent bird trilled again, and Harry felt a wave of warmth and loyalty emanate from it. Somehow, he knew this creature would remain with him, a steadfast companion in the strange new world he found himself thrust into. "We should proceed to your vaults immediately," Ragnar decided. "Before the ministry officials insist on accompanying us." Harry nodded, reaching up tentatively to stroke the phoenix's brilliant plumage. The feathers felt like warm silk beneath his fingers. "What's your name?" he whispered to the bird. In response, a word seemed to form in his mind, though he hadn't exactly heard it: Luminaris. Luminaris, Harry repeated aloud, and the phoenix trilled in confirmation. "A fitting name for the companion of the magical king," Ragnar commented. "Now, we must hurry." As they left the inheritance chamber, Harry caught sight of his reflection in a polished gold panel on the wall. The lightning bolt scar on his forehead, which had been an angry red just hours ago, now appeared silver, like a healed wound that had been there for years. And though he couldn't see the magical crown that had descended upon him, there was something different about his eyes, a subtle glow that hadn't been there before. Harry Potter had entered Gringotts as an orphan boy who knew nothing of his heritage. He was leaving as something else entirely, something the wizarding world hadn't seen in 1,000 years. And as Luminaris shifted on his shoulder, radiating steadfast loyalty, Harry made a silent promise to himself: whatever this new role meant, he would use it to make his parents proud. The journey to Harry's vaults was unlike anything he could have imagined. They traveled in a special cart that Ragnar explained was reserved for the most distinguished clients, larger than standard, with comfortable seats and enchantments to prevent the nauseating rocking typical of the bank's transportation system. Hagrid seemed particularly grateful for this, though he still clutched the sides with white knuckles as they plunged deep into the earth. Luminaris had chosen to fly alongside rather than endure the cart ride, occasionally disappearing in a flash of flame only to reappear further ahead, as if scouting their path. "The Potter vault first," Ragnar directed the goblin operating the cart. "Then Peverell, Gryffindor, and Slytherin, in that order." "How deep are they?" Harry asked, watching as they passed hundreds of vault doors. "The Potter vault is on level 5, respectable for a noble house of its age." "The others?" Ragnar paused. "The Peverell vault lies on level 12. Slytherin and Gryffindor are on level 15, among the deepest and most ancient vaults in Gringotts." The cart began to slow as they approached a large door of polished bronze. "The Potter family vault," Ragnar announced as they came to a stop. Unlike the simple key-operated vault Harry had expected, this one featured an ornate door with the Potter crest prominently displayed in the center, a shield with a Potter's will, flanked by stags. Ragnar gestured for Harry to approach. "Place your hand on the crest and state your name and title," he instructed. Harry hesitated, then placed his palm against the cool metal. "Harry James Potter," he said, then added uncertainly, "head of House Potter." The crest glowed gold beneath his hand, and the massive door swung inward silently. Harry gaped at what lay beyond. The Potter vault was the size of the Dursleys' entire ground floor. One section contained mountains of gold, silver, and bronze coins that dwarfed the modest pile he'd expected to find. But it was the rest of the vault that truly took his breath away. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books, scrolls, and artifacts. Display cases held jewelry, weapons, and objects Harry couldn't identify. Portraits hung on the walls, their occupants stirring as the door opened, eyes fixing on Harry with evident curiosity. "Your family legacy," Ragnar said quietly. "The accumulation of generations of Potters." Harry stepped inside, overwhelmed. Where would he even begin? "I would suggest focusing on essentials today," Ragnar advised, seeming to read his thoughts. "Family grimoires, the head's journal, and any items that seem to call to you. We can return for a more thorough exploration later." Harry nodded gratefully. "How will I know which are the grimoires?" "They will recognize you," Ragnar said simply. As if on cue, 3 books on a nearby shelf began to glow softly. Harry approached and found them bound in different materials, one in red leather, one in what looked like woven gold threads, and one in a material he couldn't identify that shifted colors as he watched. The Potter family grimoires, Ragnarok confirmed. Basic magic, advanced spellcraft, and family secrets, respectively. They will only open to those of Potter blood. Harry carefully collected the books, which felt warm in his hands, almost like living things. As he turned, his attention was caught by a small wooden box on a pedestal nearby. Something about it pulled at him. "That," said a voice from one of the portraits, making Harry jump, "is your mother's work." Harry turned to face the portrait. A man who looked remarkably like himself, but older, with hazel eyes instead of green, smiled down at him. Beside him stood a beautiful woman with Harry's eyes and deep red hair. "Mum? Dad?" Harry whispered, his throat tight. "Hello, son," James Potter said, his painted eyes crinkling with a smile. "Looks like you've had quite a day." Lily Potter's portrait smiled warmly. "We always knew you were special, Harry, though I admit even we didn't expect this." She gestured to the rings on his hand and the phoenix that had just flamed into the vault to perch on a nearby chair. Harry wanted nothing more than to stay and talk with his parents' portraits, but Ragnarok cleared his throat. "We must continue to the other vaults," the goblin reminded him gently. "There will be time to return here." Harry nodded reluctantly, turning back to the small wooden box his mother's portrait had indicated. "What is this?" "My research," Lily's portrait explained. "I was working on advanced protective charms before everything happened. Take it with you, Harry. I think you'll find it useful in your new role." Harry carefully picked up the box, which opened at his touch to reveal a journal bound in green leather and several crystal vials containing swirling silver memories. "A pensieve can be found in the Peverell vault," James's portrait informed him. "It will allow you to view those memories." "Thank you," Harry said, carefully replacing the vials and closing the box. He added it to his growing collection, along with a small bag of galleons for his school supplies and a leather pouch Ragnarok informed him was enchanted to connect directly to his vaults, allowing him to withdraw funds without visiting the bank. "We must continue," Ragnarok urged. Harry reluctantly bid farewell to his parents' portraits, promising to return soon, and followed Ragnarok back to the cart. As they descended further into the bowels of Gringotts, the air grew colder and the passage narrower. Hagrid looked increasingly uncomfortable but remained steadfastly at Harry's side. The Peverell vault was protected by no mere door, but by what appeared to be a solid wall of black stone shot through with silver veins. No keyhole or handle was visible. "The Peverell inheritance is among our most heavily protected," Ragnarok explained. "The family was known for its mastery over certain aspects of magic that many fear." "What kind of magic?" Harry asked. Ragnarok's expression was solemn. "Death magic, your majesty." The Peverells were said to have cheated death itself. Harry swallowed hard, unconsciously touching the Peverell ring on his finger. As he did, the silver veins in the black wall began to glow, tracing the same triangular symbol that adorned the ring. The wall simply vanished, revealing a vault that seemed to exist in perpetual twilight. Inside, artifacts both beautiful and terrible lined the walls. Ancient texts bound in materials Harry didn't recognize sat on shelves of dark wood. Display cases held items that seemed to pull at the shadows around them. And in the center, on a pedestal of white marble that stood out starkly against the darkness, lay three objects: a wand, a stone, and a cloak. "The Deathly Hallows," Hagrid gasped, speaking for the first time since they'd left the inheritance chamber. "They're real." "Very real," Ragnarok said gravely. "Though the wand and stone have been lost for centuries. These are merely ceremonial representations." The cloak, however, stirred as Harry approached, as though greeting an old friend. "That appears to be the genuine article," Ragnarok noted with surprise. "The true cloak of invisibility, not a mere invisibility cloak as most believe exists." Harry reached out hesitantly and touched the cloak. It felt like water woven into fabric, impossibly light and fluid. "This was my father's," he realized suddenly. "Dumbledore returned it to me at Christmas." "Dumbledore had this?" Ragnar's tone was sharp with disapproval. It was never his to hold or return. It is your birthright as a Peverell. Harry carefully picked up the cloak, which seemed almost to leap into his arms. As he did, he noticed a large stone basin on a side table, filled with a silvery substance that was neither liquid nor gas. The pensieve, Hagrid said, nodding toward it. For Viwin memories, like your dad mentioned. After collecting the pensieve, which Ragnar shrunk down for easier transport, and several books that seemed to call to him from the Peverell shelves, they continued even deeper into Gringotts. The Gryffindor and Slytherin vaults were located opposite each other in a vast circular chamber. Both doors were imposing, Gryffindor's made of gold with a ruby-eyed lion's head as the centerpiece, Slytherin's of dark silver with emerald serpents coiling across its surface. These vaults haven't been opened since the founder's direct lines died out, Ragnar explained. What lies within has been untouched for nearly 1,000 years. Harry approached the Gryffindor vault first, drawn by the warmth radiating from the door. As he placed his hand on the lion's head, it came to life beneath his touch, opening its mouth in a silent roar. The door swung open to reveal a vault that seemed bathed in perpetual sunlight. Inside, artifacts of gold and ruby gleamed. Weapons lined one wall, swords, shields, and armor crafted with exquisite skill. Books and scrolls filled massive shelves, and a large desk stood in the center, as though Godric Gryffindor himself had just stepped away momentarily. But what caught Harry's eye was a pedestal near the back, upon which rested a jeweled scabbard. Unlike the weapons on the wall, this seemed meant for ceremonial use, a king's regalia rather than a warrior's tool. The royal scabbard, Ragnar breathed. Legend says it was enchanted to protect its wearer from injury. Harry approached and carefully lifted the scabbard. It was surprisingly light, the gold and rubies catching the light with every movement. As he touched it, he felt the same warmth that had surged through him when he put on the Gryffindor ring. After collecting the scabbard and several books from the Gryffindor vault, they crossed to the Slytherin door. Harry felt a distinct chill as he approached, though not an unpleasant one, more like stepping into shade on a hot day. The emerald serpents adorning the door moved at his approach, slithering across the metal surface to form a framework around a central seal. Open for the air, Harry found himself hissing, the parseltongue coming naturally to his lips. The serpents rearranged themselves into a circular pattern, and the door swung inward. Unlike the warm glow of the Gryffindor vault, the Slytherin vault was lit by a cool green light that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. The space was dominated by shelves of books and carefully organized artifacts, each labeled in precise handwriting. Salazar was nothing if not methodical, Ragnar commented as Harry gazed around in awe. A large cabinet against the far wall drew Harry's attention. Inside, he found vials of potions preserved by magic, their contents still viable after centuries. Beside them lay a book bound in basilisk skin, its title etched in silver, Royal Potions and Elixirs. Slytherin was known for his skill in potions, Ragnar explained. It is said he created mixtures that could heal any wound, cure any ailment, or subtly influence the minds of enemies without detection. Harry carefully added the book to his collection, along with several others that seemed to call to him from the shelves. As he turned to leave, he noticed a small silver box on a reading table. Inside was a signet ring bearing the Slytherin crest, not an heir ring like the one he already wore, but a symbol of office. The royal seal of judgment, Ragnar identified it. Used to detect truth and falsehood when hearing petitions. A useful tool for a king. By the time they returned to the cart, Harry's arms were full of books, artifacts, and items of royal regalia. Ragnar provided an enchanted bag similar to Hagrid's coat pockets, capable of holding far more than its size suggested. There is much more to explore in each vault, the Goblin director said, but this should suffice for your immediate needs. As they ascended back toward the surface, Hagrid finally broke his stunned silence. Harry. I mean, Your Majesty, what happens now? It was a question Harry had been asking himself since the crown of magic had descended upon his head. He was supposed to be buying school supplies, preparing for Hogwarts. Instead, he discovered he was not just a wizard, but a king. "I still want to go to Hogwarts," he said firmly. "I need to learn magic properly. And..." He hesitated, then continued with more conviction, "I think I need to understand this world before I try to rule it." Ragnar nodded approvingly. "A wise approach, Your Majesty. The monarch who rules from ignorance rules poorly indeed. But won't the ministry try to, I don't know, stop this somehow?" Harry asked, remembering Ragnar's earlier concern. "They may try," the goblin conceded, "but they cannot override magic itself. The crown has chosen you, and no wizard-made law can undo that. However," he added with a shrewd look, "politics is rarely so straightforward. You would be wise to establish your position firmly before anyone can move against you." "How do I do that?" "First, by formally accepting the Goblin Nation's allegiance," Ragnar said. "Our people recognize the authority of the magical crown above the ministry. With our support, your financial and political foundation will be secure." "Then by all means," Harry said, "I accept your allegiance with gratitude." Ragnar inclined his head. "When we return to the surface, I will make the proclamation official. Beyond that, you should consider where you will reside until term begins. The Potter family has several properties, as do the other houses you now head. None would be more suitable than the royal residence, however." "Royal residence?" "Avalon Castle," Ragnar explained. "Hidden by powerful magic when the last king fell, it is said to reappear only when the crown chooses a new ruler." Harry's head was spinning again. A castle? His own castle? The thought was as overwhelming as it was incredible. How would I even find it? "The Royal Phoenix can guide you," Ragnar said, nodding to where Luminaris flew beside their cart. "They are tied to the royal magic and can always find their way to Avalon." As they neared the surface, the sounds of commotion reached them. The cart slowed to a stop at a platform different from the one they'd departed from. "The private entrance," Ragnar explained. "I thought it best to avoid the main hall for now. Word has spread quickly, and the bank is somewhat overrun with interested parties." Harry could hear raised voices even from where they stood. "What's happening?" "The news of a magical coronation has spread throughout Diagon Alley and beyond," Ragnar said grimly. "Ministry officials, reporters, curious citizens, all demanding information. And I suspect Professor Dumbledore will arrive shortly, if he hasn't already." Hagrid shifted uncomfortably at the mention of Dumbledore. "He's a great man, Dumbledore," he said, though with less conviction than before. But magic itself chose Harry. That's something even Dumbledore has to respect." "Indeed," Ragnar agreed, leading them down a corridor toward what appeared to be an office. "I've arranged a secure location where we can finalize matters before you face the public." The office they entered was luxurious by goblin standards, all dark wood, gleaming metal, and rich fabrics. A large desk dominated one end, while comfortable chairs surrounded a low table at the other. Windows charmed to show an outside view revealed Diagon Alley, where a crowd had gathered before Gringotts' main entrance. "Word spreads quickly," Ragnar observed, gesturing for Harry to take a seat. "We should prepare a statement." "A statement?" Harry echoed weakly. "What should I say?" "The truth, delivered with authority," Ragnar advised. "You are Harry James Potter, chosen by magic as King of Magical Britain. You intend to attend Hogwarts while learning your responsibilities. And you look forward to working with all magical beings to create a prosperous and just society." Harry nodded slowly. It sounded reasonable, if overwhelming. "And after the statement?" "You should complete your school shopping as planned," Ragnar said, surprising him. "It will demonstrate normalcy and confidence. The goblins will provide security, of course." A knock at the door interrupted them. A goblin entered, bearing a small wooden box. "The royal seals, as requested," he announced, presenting the box to Ragnar, who in turn offered it to Harry. Inside, nestled on velvet, lay several items, a signet ring larger than his heir rings, bearing a complex crest that somehow incorporated elements of all three houses, a stamp for sealing documents with wax, and a small vial of golden liquid. The royal seal of state, Ragnarok identified the ring, to be worn on ceremonial occasions. The seal press for official documents. And liquid royal seal, enchanted to recognize your magical signature. One drop on any document makes it magically binding and impossible to forge. Harry examined each item carefully before closing the box. Thank you. One final matter before we proceed, Ragnarok said, his tone becoming formal once more. As bank director, I officially offer the service of the Goblin Nation to your Majesty. This includes not only banking and financial management, but also the traditional roles goblins held in the royal court, ward crafting, metalworking, and security. I accept with gratitude, Harry replied, instinctively matching Ragnarok's formality. The Goblin Nation has already shown me more loyalty and respect than I've known in my life. Ragnarok's expression softened momentarily. Magic chooses wisely, your Majesty. Now, shall we face your public? Harry took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and nodded. Whatever awaited him beyond those doors, he would face it with the dignity magic itself seemed to believe he possessed. After all, he'd survived 11 years with the Dursleys, surely he could survive being king. As Ragnarok led the way toward the bank's main floor, Luminaris swooped down to perch once more on Harry's shoulder, trilling an encouraging note. Harry reached up to stroke the phoenix's warm feathers, drawing comfort from the creature's unwavering loyalty. Your Majesty, Ragnarok said as they paused before the final doors, remember that you need not answer every question or address every concern today. You are king, not politician. Your word is final. Harry nodded, drawing himself up to his full height, unimpressive though it was. I'm ready. The doors swung open, and Harry stepped forward to meet his destiny, and to buy his school books, because apparently even kings needed proper textbooks for their first year at Hogwarts. The scene that greeted Harry as he emerged into the main hall of Gringotts was barely controlled chaos. Ministry officials in various colored robes argued with goblin guards. Reporters clutching notebooks and cameras jostled for position. Ordinary witches and wizards craned their necks, trying to see past the officials and journalists. The moment Harry appeared, flanked by Ragnarok on one side and Hagrid on the other, with Luminaris perched regally on his shoulder, a hush fell over the crowd. Then, as one, the goblins throughout the hall dropped to one knee, fists crossed over their chests in salute. His magical majesty, Harry James Potter, Ragnarok announced, his voice magically amplified to reach every corner of the vast space. King of magical Britain by right of magic and blood, ruler of the united houses of Peverell-Slytherin, Gryffindor, and Potter, protector of the realm. For a moment, stunned silence reigned. Then the hall erupted. Flashes from cameras nearly blinded Harry. Questions were shouted from all directions. Ministry officials conferred urgently with one another. And through it all, the goblins remained kneeling, a silent wall of respect and deference that stood in stark contrast to the human chaos. A portly man in a lime green bowler hat pushed his way to the front of the crowd, followed by a severe-looking woman in pink and a tall black man in deep blue robes. Potter, the portly man blustered, then seemed to catch himself. That is. Mr. Potter, what is the meaning of this? Coronation? King? Preposterous. Ragnarok's expression hardened. Minister Fudge, you address His Majesty King Harry. The crown of magic has manifested for the first time in a millennium. This is not a matter for debate or denial. The woman in pink gave a simpering laugh. Now really, this has gone quite far enough. The boy is clearly confused, and you goblins are taking advantage. Silence, Harry said, surprising even himself with the authority in his voice. The royal magic stirred within him, and his command carried weight beyond his years. The woman's mouth snapped shut mid-sentence. Minister Fudge, Harry continued, remembering the name Ragnarok had used, I understand this is unexpected. It was for me as well. But magic itself has made this decision, and neither of us can change that. The tall black man studied Harry with keen eyes. I am Kingsley Shacklebolt, head of the Auror office, he introduced himself, his deep voice calm and measured. May I ask what evidence there is of this magical coronation? Before Harry could answer, a new voice cut through the murmurs. I believe I can confirm the magical event, Kingsley. The crowd parted to reveal Albus Dumbledore, resplendent in midnight blue robes scattered with silver stars. His long beard gleamed in the light, and his blue eyes fixed on Harry with an unreadable expression. Ah, Dumbledore, Fudge said, relief evident in his voice. Some sense at last. Tell these people that Potter cannot possibly be king of anything. Dumbledore approached slowly, his gaze never leaving Harry's face. I'm afraid, Cornelius, that I cannot do that. I felt the surge of ancient magic myself at precisely 10:47 this morning. It was unmistakable. What? Fudge sputtered. You can't seriously believe, I believe what magic itself has declared, Dumbledore said mildly, though there was a tension around his eyes that belied his casual tone. He stopped before Harry and inclined his head, not quite a bow, but a definite acknowledgement. Your Majesty. This is unexpected. Harry met the headmaster's gaze steadily. For me as well, Professor. Albus, the pink-clad woman hissed, the political implications are considerable, yes, Dolores, Dumbledore finished for her. But the magical implications are more so. Magic itself has spoken. We may adapt or resist, but we cannot change what has occurred. A reporter pushed forward, a woman with jeweled spectacles and acid-green quill that moved across her parchment of its own accord. Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet, she introduced herself with a predatory smile. Your Majesty, how does it feel to be elevated from orphan to king in the span of a morning? And what are your plans for your new kingdom? Harry hesitated, then remembered Ragnarok's advice about speaking truth with authority. It feels overwhelming, he admitted. Until yesterday, I didn't even know I was a wizard. Now I'm apparently a king as well. But I intend to learn all I can about this world before making any major changes. And will you still be attending Hogwarts? Another reporter called out. Yes, Harry said firmly. I need a proper magical education, and Hogwarts is where my parents wanted me to study. Will you be disbanding the ministry? Shouted a wizard from the back. No, Harry replied, earning a visible slump of relief from Fudge. At least, not immediately. I have a lot to learn about how the wizarding world is governed before making such decisions. Luminaris chose that moment to trill loudly, the Phoenix song cutting through the babble of questions and momentarily silencing the crowd. The majestic bird fixed its intelligent gaze on Dumbledore, who stared back with evident surprise. A royal phoenix, the headmaster murmured. I had thought them extinct. Magic provides for its chosen, Ragnarok stated. Now, if you'll excuse us, His Majesty has school supplies to purchase. The absurdity of the statement, a king buying school supplies, caused a ripple of laughter through the crowd, easing some of the tension. Perhaps, Dumbledore suggested smoothly, I could accompany young Harry, that is, His Majesty, for his shopping. We have much to discuss, and I can ensure he receives the respect he deserves. Harry glanced at Hagrid, who looked torn between his loyalty to Dumbledore and his newfound awe of Harry's status. Then he looked to Ragnarok, who gave a barely perceptible nod. I would appreciate your company, Professor, Harry said carefully. Though Hagrid and I were managing well enough. Of course, Dumbledore agreed with a benign smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Hagrid is most capable. But perhaps additional perspective would be beneficial. Minister Fudge stepped forward again. This is highly irregular, Dumbledore. The boy, His Majesty, should come to the ministry for a proper briefing and, I will visit the ministry tomorrow, Minister Fudge, Harry interrupted, instinctively knowing he couldn't show weakness by acquiescing to demands. Today, I will complete my planned activities. You're welcome to arrange a meeting through Gringotts for tomorrow afternoon. Fudge looked like he wanted to object but instead forced a tight smile. Very well. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, then. We have much to discuss. Indeed we do, Harry agreed, wondering what exactly he'd just committed himself to. Ragnarok signaled, and the goblin guards formed a protective corridor through the crowd. His Majesty will now continue his business in the alley. All official statements will be issued through Gringotts until further notice. As Harry walked through the human corridor, conscious of hundreds of eyes upon him, he felt both powerful and desperately out of his depth. Luminaris remained steadfast on his shoulder, and Hagrid's massive presence behind him was reassuring, but Dumbledore's calculating gaze made him uneasy. The moment they stepped outside Gringotts, whispers spread through Diagon Alley like wildfire. Shoppers stopped to stare, some bowing awkwardly, others gaping openly. Harry tried to keep his expression neutral, remembering Uncle Vernon's frequent complaints about politicians who couldn't keep their dignity. Perhaps Madame Malkin's first, Dumbledore suggested as they moved down the alley. Royal or not, you'll need proper school robes. Harry nodded, grateful for the direction. As they walked, Dumbledore spoke softly, his words for Harry's ears alone. This is an unexpected development, Harry. The implications are far-reaching. I didn't ask for this, Professor, Harry replied quietly. Few who are worthy of power actively seek it, Dumbledore observed. But I must caution you, there are many who will attempt to use your new status for their own ends. And others who will see you as a threat to their authority. Like the Ministry? Dumbledore's eyes twinkled briefly. Among others. The wizarding world has functioned without a monarch for 1,000 years. Many have grown comfortable with the current power structure. I just want to learn magic and figure things out, Harry admitted. I don't want to overthrow anything. A wise approach, Dumbledore acknowledged. Though magic itself may have other plans. They reached Madame Malkin's, where the seamstress nearly fainted at the sight of Harry with his phoenix and entourage. When Ragnarok explained that His Majesty required school robes as well as a few suitable royal garments, the woman practically tripped over herself in her haste to accommodate. As Harry stood on a footstool being measured, he caught sight of his reflection in the mirror. He still looked like himself, small for his age, with messy black hair and round glasses, but something fundamental had changed. His posture was straighter, his eyes more focused, and the silver lightning bolt scar on his forehead seemed to gleam with inner light. Remarkable, Dumbledore murmured, watching Harry's reflection as well. The magic has already begun to change you. Is that good? Harry asked uncertainly. That remains to be seen, the headmaster replied enigmatically. Magic itself rarely acts without purpose, but its goals may not always align with our own. By the time they left Madame Malkin's, with promises that Harry's new wardrobe would be delivered to Gringotts by evening, word had spread throughout the alley. Crowds gathered to catch a glimpse of the boy king, and shop owners emerged from their stores to bow as he passed. The rest of the shopping expedition proceeded in similar fashion. At Flourish and Blots, the manager personally helped Harry select his school books, plus several volumes on wizarding law and governance that hadn't been on his list. At the apothecary, the owner insisted on providing ingredients of only the finest quality. And at Ollivander's, the wand maker greeted Harry with a bow so deep his nose nearly touched the floor. I have been expecting you, Your Majesty, Ollivander said, his silvery eyes gleaming in the dim shop. Though I confess, not quite in this capacity. The wand selection process was fascinating and slightly unnerving. Ollivander seemed more interested in the rings on Harry's hand than in the phoenix on his shoulder, muttering to himself as he pulled box after box from the shelves. Curious combination, very curious indeed. I wonder if perhaps. Finally, after nearly a dozen failed matches, Ollivander presented a wand of holly and phoenix feather. The moment Harry touched it, he felt a surge of warmth and power. Gold and silver sparks shot from the tip, forming a momentary crown in the air before dissipating. Curious, Ollivander breathed. Very curious. What's curious? Harry asked, still marveling at the connection he felt with the wand. I remember every wand I've ever sold, Your Majesty. Every single wand. And it so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather resides in your wand gave another feather, just one other. It is curious that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, why, its brother gave you that scar. Harry felt a chill run down his spine. You mean Voldemort's wand? Ollivander flinched at the name but nodded. The Dark Lord did great things with that wand, terrible, yes, but great. And now the brother wand has chosen the king. It seems, Dumbledore interjected, his expression thoughtful, that the connection between you and Voldemort runs deeper than previously thought, Harry. But he tried to kill me, Harry protested. We can't be connected. Magic works in mysterious ways, Dumbledore said. Perhaps this connection will prove significant in ways we cannot yet foresee. As they left Ollivander's, Harry's mind whirled with questions. Everything he learned seemed to raise 10 more uncertainties. How could he be connected to Voldemort? What did it mean that magic had chosen him as king? And how was he supposed to handle any of this while also starting school? Their final stop was Elop's Owl Emporium, where Harry had planned to purchase a pet. The moment he entered, however, every owl in the shop began to bow, dipping their heads in perfect unison. Well, I never, the shopkeeper said in awe. They sense your status, Your Majesty. Before Harry could respond, a beautiful snowy owl fluttered down from the highest perch and landed before him, offering her leg as though for service. She's beautiful, Harry said, carefully stroking her white feathers. Hedwig is one of my finest, the shopkeeper said proudly. Arctic royalty among owls. It seems fitting she should serve you. Not serve, Harry corrected gently. Be my friend. The owl, Hedwig, hooted softly and nipped his finger affectionately. She's a gift, the shopkeeper declared suddenly. An honor to provide Her Royal Majesty's first postal owl. Despite Harry's protests that he could pay, the man insisted, beaming with pride at the thought of his shop being associated with the crown. It was a pattern that had repeated throughout the day, shopkeepers refusing payment or offering their finest goods at reduced prices. You'll need to establish royal accounts, Ragnarok advised as they left the shop. Otherwise, the economy of Diagon Alley will collapse under the weight of refused galleons. The sun was beginning to set by the time they completed their shopping. Harry's school supplies had been collected, his new wardrobe arranged for delivery, and his status as magical king announced to what felt like the entire wizarding population of Britain. What happens now? He asked Ragnarok as they stood outside Gringotts once more. Where do I go? That, Dumbledore interjected before Ragnarok could answer, is a matter requiring careful consideration. As your magical guardian, with respect, headmaster, Ragnarok interrupted, you are not His Majesty's guardian in any capacity. That role, as I explained earlier, fell to the ministry after his parents' deaths, and even that claim is now nullified by his ascension. Dumbledore's smile remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened slightly. Nevertheless, arrangements must be made for Harry's safety and education. Perhaps returning to his aunt and uncle until term begins. No, Harry said, with such firmness that both Dumbledore and Ragnarok looked at him in surprise. I'm not going back there. Ever. Harry, Dumbledore began in a gentle tone, there are protections at your aunt's house, I'm king now, aren't I? Harry interrupted, straightening his shoulders. And I say I'm not going back to people who kept me in a cupboard for 10 years. A shocked silence followed this declaration. Even Hagrid, who had remained mostly quiet throughout the shopping expedition, made a strangled noise of outrage. A cupboard, he growled. Yeah, never said nothin' about no cupboard, Harry. Dumbledore's expression was grave. I was not aware your living conditions were quite so inadequate. That's putting it mildly, Harry muttered. His Majesty, Ragnarok interjected smoothly, has several properties at his disposal through his various inheritances. The Potter family manor in Wales is well protected, as is the Peverell estate in Cornwall. However, he continued with a significant look at Harry, Avalon Castle would be the most appropriate residence, if it can be located. Avalon. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. That is merely legend, Director Ragnarok. So too was the magical crown until this morning, Ragnarok countered. Royal phoenixes were also thought mythical, yet here one sits upon His Majesty's shoulder. As if on cue, Luminaris trilled a short, musical phrase and launched into the air, circling once before hovering expectantly. He wants to guide me somewhere, Harry said, somehow understanding the phoenix's intent. Ragnarok nodded. To Avalon, I suspect. The question is how to follow. Phoenix travel is typically limited to the bird and one passenger. I believe, Dumbledore said thoughtfully, that royal phoenixes historically could create paths for others to follow. A bridge of flame, if ancient texts are to be believed. Can you do that? Harry asked Luminaris, who trilled affirmatively. We should return to Gringotts first, Ragnarok decided. The departure of a king should not be a public spectacle, and preparations must be made. Inside the bank, now closed to the public for the evening, Ragnarok led them to a secure chamber designed for apparition and other magical transportation. Goblin guards stood at attention along the walls, and a circular platform in the center glowed faintly with protective runes. From here, Your Majesty can follow your phoenix without fear of being traced or intercepted, Ragnarok explained. Though I would recommend choosing your initial companions carefully. Until Avalon is properly secured, limiting knowledge of its location would be prudent. Harry considered his options. Hagrid had been his first friend in the wizarding world and had shown nothing but loyalty. Dumbledore, despite his attempts to send Harry back to the Dursleys, was still the most powerful and knowledgeable wizard Harry had met. And Ragnarok had proved an invaluable guide through the day's extraordinary events. I'd like all of you to come, Harry decided. Hagrid, Professor Dumbledore, Director Ragnarok, you've all helped me today, and I trust you. Hagrid beamed with pride. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled thoughtfully. Ragnarok bowed, looking pleased by the inclusion. As your majesty wishes, the goblin said. I am honored to be among your first council. Not a council, Harry corrected, uncomfortable with the formality. Just, friends. Advisors. I don't know what I'm doing, and I'll need help. A wise king recognizes his limitations, Dumbledore observed, though Harry thought he detected a note of calculation in the headmaster's voice. And seeks counsel accordingly. Luminaris, Harry addressed his phoenix, can you show us the way to Avalon? The magnificent bird trilled an affirmative note and launched into the air. Hovering above the platform, Luminaris began to beat his wings rhythmically, each downstroke releasing a shower of golden sparks. The sparks didn't fall but instead hung in the air, forming a swirling pathway that extended forward before disappearing into what looked like a tear in reality. A phoenix gate, Dumbledore breathed. I've read of these, but never witnessed one. Step onto the path, Your Majesty, Ragnarok instructed. We will follow. Harry hesitated only briefly before stepping forward. The moment his foot touched the golden sparks, they solidified beneath him, forming a bridge that felt as firm as stone despite its appearance. With Luminaris flying just ahead, Harry walked forward, his heart pounding with anticipation. As he passed through the tear in reality, Harry felt a brief sensation of warmth wash over him, and then he was standing on a grassy hilltop under a twilit sky. Before him, silhouetted against the fading light, stood a castle unlike any he'd seen before, not grim and forbidding like the medieval fortresses in Dudley's history books, but elegant and almost ethereal, with soaring towers and walls that seemed to glow softly from within. Hagrid, Dumbledore, and Ragnarok emerged from the Phoenix Gate behind him, each gazing at the castle with expressions ranging from awe to thoughtful analysis. Avalon, Ragnarok said reverently. The seat of magical kingship, hidden for 1,000 years, now revealed to its rightful ruler. It's beautiful, Harry whispered. And powerful, Dumbledore added, his wand in hand as he examined the magical protections surrounding the castle. The wards here are unlike any I've encountered, older and deeper than even those at Hogwarts. As Harry took his first step toward his new home, he felt the weight of the day's discoveries settling upon his shoulders. In the space of hours, he had gone from believing himself an unwanted orphan to learning he was a wizard, the heir to 4 ancient houses, and the king of magical Britain. Yet as overwhelming as it all was, Harry couldn't help feeling a sense of rightness, as though he had finally found where he belonged. With Luminaris soaring above, Hagrid's steadfast presence behind him, and the promise of Hogwarts still ahead, Harry walked toward Avalon Castle, toward his future, his responsibility, and perhaps, at last, his home. Chapter 2, The Castle Awakens. Avalon Castle had stood empty for a millennium, yet it welcomed Harry as if he'd only stepped out yesterday. Torches flared to life along the walls as he approached the massive oak doors, which swung open at his touch without a sound. Inside, the great hall glowed with warm light from floating orbs that drifted toward him like curious fish, illuminating frescoes of ancient magical kings and queens on the vaulted ceiling. "It recognizes you," Ragnarok observed, his gravelly voice hushed with reverence. "The castle remembers its master." Harry ran his fingers along a marble banister, marveling at the complete absence of dust. "It's like time stopped in here." "In a manner of speaking, it did," Dumbledore said, examining the surroundings with keen interest. "Avalon exists partially outside normal time, a necessity for a structure this ancient to remain intact." Hagrid whistled, the sound echoing through the cavernous space. "Blimey, Harry. You've got yourself a proper palace." Harry couldn't argue with that assessment. As they explored, they discovered dining halls that could seat hundreds, libraries filled with texts in languages Harry didn't recognize, training grounds for everything from dueling to archery, and gardens where plants thrived despite centuries without human care. The living quarters were equally impressive, with the royal suite spanning an entire wing of the castle's top floor. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Harry divided his time between exploring Avalon, studying the grimoires and books he'd collected from his vaults, and attending a seemingly endless parade of meetings with various officials and dignitaries who sought audience with the new king. Minister Fudge had arrived the day after Harry's coronation, a mixture of obsequiousness and barely concealed resentment in his manner as he outlined the traditional relationship between the ministry and the crown. Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, had been more straightforward, acknowledging the legal supremacy of the monarch while tactfully suggesting a gradual transition that wouldn't destabilize magical Britain. Gringotts representatives came daily, helping Harry understand his financial holdings and the complex web of businesses, properties, and investments connected to his various houses. Ragnarok himself oversaw the establishment of the royal treasury, separate from but connected to Harry's personal vaults. Through it all, Harry found himself relying increasingly on Ragnarok's counsel. Dumbledore had returned to Hogwarts after 2 days, citing preparations for the coming term, though he promised to continue advising Harry at school. Hagrid had stayed longer but eventually followed, needing to tend to his groundskeeper duties. The portraits from Harry's family vaults, now hanging in Avalon's portrait gallery, provided invaluable historical context. His parents' portraits were particularly helpful, explaining Potter family traditions and offering personal advice that no book could provide. "Remember, Harry," his mother's portrait had told him the night before his departure for Hogwarts, "being king doesn't make you any less an 11-year-old boy who deserves a childhood. Learn, make friends, play Quidditch if you want to. The crown may define your responsibilities, but it shouldn't define who you are." Now, standing on platform 9 3/4 amid the steam and chaos of departure day, Harry desperately tried to remember that advice. Despite Ragnarok's security measures, goblin guards disguised as ordinary platform attendants, and his attempt at inconspicuous clothing, whispers followed him like persistent shadows. "Is that him? The king, look. They say he lives in a castle that appeared out of nowhere, supposed to have a phoenix." Harry kept his eyes forward, Hedwig's cage clutched in one hand, the other resting on the trunk a goblin porter discreetly guided behind him. Luminaris had elected to fly to Hogwarts separately, arguing through their growing mental bond that his presence would only attract more attention. Harry couldn't disagree, though he missed the phoenix's reassuring weight on his shoulder. "Your Majesty," the goblin porter murmured, your private compartment is prepared at the front of the train. Harry frowned. Private compartment? I'd rather sit with other students. The goblin looked startled. But the security protocols can be maintained wherever I sit, Harry interrupted firmly. I'm going to Hogwarts to learn and make friends, not to hide in isolation. After a moment's hesitation, the goblin nodded. As you wish, Your Majesty. The guards will adjust accordingly. The porter helped load Harry's trunk onto the train, then disappeared with a respectful bow. Harry took a deep breath and boarded, searching for an empty or nearly empty compartment where he might have a chance at normal conversation before his status inevitably intruded. Near the end of the train, he found one occupied only by a red-haired boy who seemed close to his own age. The boy was gazing out the window, apparently oblivious to the commotion Harry's arrival had caused on the platform. Excuse me, Harry said. Is anyone sitting there? He pointed to the seat opposite. The boy looked up and his eyes widened, flicking to Harry's forehead where the silver lightning scar was visible despite his attempts to cover it with his hair. Blimey, the boy breathed. You're him, aren't you? The king. Harry sighed, his hopes for a normal introduction fading. I'm Harry, he said simply, extending his hand. And yes, apparently I'm also, that other thing. Mind if I sit here? The boy stared at the offered hand for a moment before shaking it vigorously. Ron Weasley, he introduced himself. And no, course not. Sit wherever you want, I mean, you can probably sit wherever you want anyway, being who you are, but, he stopped, ears turning red. Sorry. I'm making a right mess of this, aren't I? Harry laughed, feeling some of the tension drain away. Not at all. And I'd rather sit with someone who talks to me normally than someone who treats me like I might order their beheading. Ron grinned, relaxing visibly. Do you actually have the power to order beheadings? God, I hope not, Harry replied, settling into the seat. I've only been a wizard for a month, and a king for most of that. I'm still figuring out what it all means. Must be bloody weird, Ron observed. One day you're normal, and the next everyone's bowing and scraping. Exactly. Harry exclaimed, grateful for the understanding. Yesterday Ragnarok, he's the head goblin at Gringotts, asked me to approve the design for royal currency with my face on it. My face, Ron. On money. Ron's eyes widened. Wicked. Think I'll ever have one of those in my pocket? If I have anything to say about it, you will, Harry promised, then hesitated. That is, if we become friends. I'd like that, but I understand if you'd rather not deal with all the king stuff. Ron looked thoughtful. My dad works at the Ministry, Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office. He came home after your coronation was announced and told us the old family magic was stirring. Said the Weasleys were traditionally strategic advisors to the magical crown, centuries ago. Really? Harry leaned forward, intrigued. Yeah. We've got this old chess set that's been passed down forever, supposedly belonged to a Weasley who was the royal battlemaster or something. Ron shrugged. Dad always said it was just family legend, but after the coronation, the pieces started moving on their own for the first time in generations. Before Harry could respond, the compartment door slid open. A girl with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth stood in the doorway, already dressed in her Hogwarts robes. Has anyone seen a toad? A boy named Neville's lost one, she said in a bossy sort of voice. Her eyes landed on Harry and widened in recognition. You're Harry Potter, the magical king. I've read all about you, well, not the king part specifically, but there are dozens of books mentioning you in connection with you-know-who's fall. And since the coronation, there's been all sorts of special editions of the Daily Prophet. I bought them all for additional background reading. She said all this very fast, then seemed to remember her manners and dropped into an awkward curtsy. Your Majesty. Harry winced. Please don't do that. I'm just Harry at school. And no, we haven't seen a toad, but I'd be happy to help look. The girl straightened, looking flustered but pleased. Oh. Well, that's very nice of you. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. She held out her hand formally. Harry shook it. Nice to meet you, Hermione. This is Ron Weasley. Ron gave a half-hearted wave, looking slightly overwhelmed by Hermione's intensity. Perhaps we could help this Neville person. Harry suggested, standing. I've heard toads can be tricky pets. That would be lovely, Hermione beamed. He's just up the corridor. They found Neville Longbottom 2 compartments away, a round-faced, teary-eyed boy who nearly fainted when Harry introduced himself. Why, Your Majesty, he stammered, attempting a bow that nearly sent him toppling into a nearby 4th year. I'm so sorry to trouble you with something as trivial as my toad. It's not trivial if he's your pet, Harry said firmly. And please, call me Harry. We're going to be classmates, after all. As they searched the train for Neville's missing toad, Harry found himself enjoying the simple task. It was normal, helpful, and gave him a chance to meet other students under circumstances that quickly moved past his royal status. Most stared and whispered at first, but the mundane nature of the search eventually led to more natural interactions. I think Trevor's making a break for the Black Lake early, Ron joked after they'd checked half the train. Probably wants to establish himself as the king of toads before we arrive. Harry laughed. Maybe he can be my amphibian advisor. I'll need experts from all walks of life. Speaking of advisors, Hermione said thoughtfully, have you established a formal court structure yet? Historically, magical monarchies operated with a mage council rather than the ministerial system we have now. Harry raised his eyebrows, impressed. You've researched magical governance? Since I read about your coronation, Hermione confirmed. It's fascinating, really. The last magical king abdicated in 1012 CE, some say he was forced out by the growing wizard councils, others that he chose to retreat from public life after a magical catastrophe. The records are frustratingly vague. You found all this out from books in a month? Ron asked, looking at Hermione with newfound respect. She blushed slightly. I like to be thorough. My parents took me to Flourish and Blot several times over the summer. I could use someone with your research skills, Harry said sincerely. The goblins have been helpful with the financial aspects, but there's so much history and law to understand. Hermione's eyes lit up at the prospect. I would be honored to help, Harry. Their toad hunting expedition was interrupted when they encountered a different group of first years in the corridor, 3 boys, the central figure pale and blonde with a pointed face and cold gray eyes. So it's true, the blonde boy said, his gaze fixed on Harry. The king is on the train. Something about his tone, entitled, assessing, put Harry immediately on guard. The 2 larger boys flanking him had the look of bodyguards, their expressions a mixture of dull confusion and attempted menace. I'm Draco Malfoy, the blonde boy continued, stepping forward and offering his hand. This is Crabbe and Goyle. Our families have served the crown for centuries. Harry shook the offered hand cautiously. Nice to meet you. You'll soon find that some wizarding families are better than others, Malfoy said, his eyes flicking dismissively to Ron's patched robes and Hermione's muggle-born appearance. I can help you tell the right sort from the wrong sort. I think I can figure that out for myself, thanks, Harry replied coolly. Malfoy's pale cheeks flushed pink. My father says the return of the crown could restore proper order to our world. The Malfoy family stands ready to support the true magical hierarchy. Before Harry could respond, Trevor the Toad chose that moment to make a break for freedom, hopping out from beneath a nearby seat and directly between Crabbe's feet. In the resulting confusion, Neville diving for his pet, Crabbe jumping back in alarm, and Goyle nearly trampling the amphibian, Harry managed to extricate himself from the uncomfortable conversation. Saved by a toad, Ron muttered as they returned to their compartment, Trevor now safely contained in Neville's pocket. That's got to be a first. The Malfoys were supporters of you-know-who during the war, he added in a lower voice. Dad says Lucius Malfoy claimed to be under the Imperius curse, but nobody really believed him. Just had enough gold to make the right people look the other way. Harry frowned, remembering Draco's comments about proper order and true magical hierarchy. Sounds like his son is hoping I'll take up where Voldemort left off. Everyone except Hermione flinched at the name. What? Harry asked, confused by their reaction. Most people don't say his name, Neville explained in a whisper. They call him you-know-who or he who must not be named. Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself, Hermione said matter-of-factly. It's quite irrational. Easy for you to say, Ron muttered. Your family wasn't around for the last war. An awkward silence fell, broken only when the food trolley arrived. Harry, eager to change the subject and remembering his newfound wealth, bought a generous selection of everything for the group to share. As they sampled chocolate frogs, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, and pumpkin pasties, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, Quidditch, which Ron explained enthusiastically to a skeptical Hermione, the 4 Hogwarts houses, and speculation about their upcoming classes. What house do you think you'll be in? Neville asked Harry as the train chugged northward. Harry hesitated. I'm not sure. My parents were both in Gryffindor, but... He touched the rings on his right hand. I'm heir to both Gryffindor and Slytherin, so I suppose either would make sense. You can't be in 2 houses at once, Ron pointed out, mouth full of cauldron cake. Maybe Harry won't be sorted at all, Hermione suggested. Historically, royal students at Hogwarts maintained separate quarters and studied with all houses. Harry hadn't considered this possibility, and he wasn't sure how he felt about it. On one hand, separate quarters sounded lonely. On the other, not being sorted would avoid the implied rejection of one founder over the other. I'd like to be sorted normally, if possible, he said finally. I want the full Hogwarts experience, not some special royal version. As the daylight began to fade, they changed into their school robes. Harry felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach that had nothing to do with his royal status and everything to do with being a normal first year about to arrive at a magical school. It was a welcome feeling. When the train finally slowed to a stop at Hogsmeade Station, Harry followed his new friends onto the platform, where Hagrid's familiar voice boomed over the crowd, Fur's years. Fur's years over here. The giant gamekeeper beamed when he spotted Harry. All right there, Harry, he called, then caught himself and added with a wink, I mean, Your Majesty. Just Harry at school, Harry reminded him, grinning. Those were your orders, remember? Right, yeah, Hagrid agreed, before herding the first years toward the fleet of small boats waiting on the shore of the Black Lake. As Harry settled into a boat with Ron, Hermione, and Neville, a familiar trill sounded overhead. Luminaris swooped down, glowing softly in the gathering darkness, and perched regally on the prow of their boat. Blimey, Ron breathed. Is that, Luminaris? Harry confirmed. My royal phoenix. It's beautiful, Hermione whispered, staring at the magnificent bird with undisguised awe. The phoenix preened under the attention, then spread his wings as Hagrid called, forward, and the fleet of boats began to glide across the smooth, dark water. Luminaris seemed to be guiding their boat, his glow illuminating the path ahead. Y'all get your first sight Hogwarts in a sec, Hagrid called over his shoulder. Just round this bend here. There was a collective, oh, as the castle came into view, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, towers and turrets reaching toward the heavens. Harry felt a strange pull in his chest, like a cord being gently tugged. Beside him, Luminaris trilled a soft, almost reverent note. As they approached the cliff upon which the castle stood, Harry's rings, particularly the Gryffindor and Slytherin heir rings, began to warm on his fingers. He glanced down to see them glowing faintly, responding to their proximity to the school the founders had built. The castle knows, he murmured, more to himself than his companions. What? Ron asked, tearing his gaze away from the spectacular view. The castle knows I'm here, Harry explained, feeling the truth of it in his bones. "It's waiting for me." Hermione looked fascinated. "Of course, as heir to two founders, you'd have a magical connection to Hogwarts itself. I wonder what form that will take." They didn't have long to wait for an answer. As the boats passed through a curtain of ivy and into an underground harbor, something extraordinary happened. Luminaris launched from the prow, flying ahead of the fleet, and as he did, every torch along the passageway burst into flame, not with ordinary fire, but with brilliant blue-gold light that reminded Harry of the phoenix's plumage. The first years gasped, and even Hagrid looked startled. "Well, that's new," the gamekeeper muttered. When they disembarked onto the rocky shore, Harry noticed the stone steps ahead were changing, rough-hewn edges smoothing, cracks repairing themselves, centuries of wear vanishing before his eyes. By the time the students began to climb, the staircase looked as if it had been carved yesterday. "The castle is repairing itself," Hermione whispered excitedly. "It's responding to your presence." At the top of the stairs, they reached a huge oak door where Hagrid raised his gigantic fist and knocked 3 times. The door swung open immediately to reveal Professor McGonagall, tall and stern in emerald robes, her black hair pulled into a tight bun. She began to welcome them, but faltered mid-sentence as she noticed the unusually bright torches, the freshly restored stonework, and finally, Luminaris perched on Harry's shoulder. Her eyes widened briefly before she composed herself. "Welcome to Hogwarts," she continued, her Scottish accent more pronounced than usual. "The start-of-term banquet will begin shortly, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you will be sorted into your houses." She explained the house system and the importance of house points before leading them across the flagstone floor of the entrance hall. Harry noticed that wherever he walked, the stones seemed to brighten, centuries of grime disappearing beneath his feet. Suits of armor they passed straightened to attention, saluting with a metallic clang that made several students jump. McGonagall led them into a small chamber off the hall, where they waited nervously for the sorting ceremony to begin. The room itself seemed to expand slightly as Harry entered, ensuring no student felt cramped despite their numbers. "Hogwarts is literally making space for you," Hermione observed quietly. "I've read that the castle has a form of sentience, but this is beyond anything described in Hogwarts, a history." After what felt like an eternity of nervous waiting, during which Harry endured more whispers and stares from classmates who hadn't noticed him on the train, McGonagall returned to lead them into the Great Hall. The moment Harry crossed the threshold, every candle in the enchanted ceiling flared brighter, casting the hall in a warm, golden glow. The hundreds of students seated at the 4 long house tables turned as one to stare, first at the first years in general, then specifically at Harry with his phoenix and softly glowing rings. At the high table, Dumbledore watched with twinkling eyes as Harry approached. Beside him, a hook-nosed, greasy-haired professor in black robes stiffened visibly, his sallow face draining of what little color it possessed as his gaze locked on Harry. But the most dramatic reaction came from Hogwarts itself. As Harry walked between the Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw tables, following McGonagall toward the front of the hall, the ancient stone floor beneath his feet began to change. Where once there had been simple flagstones, now an intricate mosaic formed, depicting the crests of all 4 houses united by a crown, the same design Harry had seen on his royal seal. Whispers erupted throughout the hall. Even McGonagall paused, staring at the transforming floor with astonishment. At the high table, several professors half rose from their seats for a better view. "The castle recognizes its heir," a dreamy voice commented from the Ravenclaw table, audible in the sudden hush. The first years gathered before the high table, where McGonagall placed a 4-legged stool. On top of the stool, she put a pointed wizard's hat, patched, frayed, and extremely dirty. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then the hat twitched, a rip near the brim opened wide like a mouth, and it began to sing. The hat's song described the 4 houses and their qualities, but when it reached the final verse, it diverged from what Harry suspected was its usual performance. "But hark! A change comes to our halls, as ancient magic stirs once more. The heirs return to these old walls, and what was hidden shall restore." So try me on, don't be afraid. Your path I'll find, your house declare. Though crown and castle both have weighed and found one worthy beyond compare. The hat finished to thunderous applause tinged with confused murmurs. At the high table, Dumbledore and McGonagall exchanged significant looks. When I call your name, you will put on the hat and sit on the stool to be sorted, McGonagall announced, unrolling a long parchment. Abbott, Hannah. The sorting proceeded normally at first, each student approaching the stool, donning the hat, and being assigned to a house after varying periods of deliberation. Harry watched as Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor, looking pleasantly surprised. Neville joined her, after nearly 5 minutes under the hat, and Malfoy was predictably sent to Slytherin within seconds of the hat touching his head. When McGonagall called Potter, Harry, the hall fell silent, then immediately erupted in excited whispers. Harry walked forward, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes following his progress. Luminaris remained on his shoulder, a warm, reassuring presence. Before Harry even reached the stool, the sorting hat straightened, its patched fabric rippling as if standing at attention. When McGonagall placed it on Harry's head, it did not fall over his eyes as it had for the other first years, but instead adjusted itself to sit like a crown upon his brow. His Magical Majesty, Harry James Potter, King of Magical Britain, the hat announced to the hall, its voice clear and carrying rather than the whisper Harry had expected to hear inside his head. Heir of Peverell, Potter, Gryffindor, and Slytherin. A shocked silence followed this pronouncement. Then the hat addressed Harry directly, its voice now private between them. Your Majesty, this is an unprecedented honor. In 1,000 years, I have sorted every student to pass through these halls, but never a king. What does that mean for my sorting? Harry thought anxiously. A complex question, the hat replied. You possess qualities valued by all 4 houses, courage worthy of Gryffindor, cunning that would serve you well in Slytherin, a mind eager for knowledge that Ravenclaw would prize, and loyalty that Hufflepuff would admire. As heir to 2 founders, you have equal claim to their houses. As king, you transcend the house system entirely. But I want to be sorted normally, Harry thought. I want to belong somewhere specific, not be separate from everyone. The hat seemed to chuckle. A desire that speaks well of your character, your Majesty. Very well, if I must choose a single house, better be Gryffindor. The last word was shouted to the hall. The Gryffindor table erupted in wild cheers, several students chanting, "We got the king! We got the king!" As Harry removed the hat, he noticed something unusual happening at the high table. What had been an ordinary wooden chair beside Dumbledore's ornate seat was transforming, growing taller and more elaborate until it resembled a throne, though slightly smaller than the headmaster's chair. The wood darkened to rich mahogany inlaid with gold, and cushions of red and green, Gryffindor and Slytherin colors, appeared on the seat and back. The castle provides for its heir, McGonagall murmured, looking both impressed and slightly unsettled. Harry quickly made his way to the Gryffindor table, where he was welcomed with enthusiasm. The Weasley twins, Ron's older brothers, Fred and George, were particularly jubilant, bowing with exaggerated flourishes that made Harry laugh despite his embarrassment. "We're not worthy," one twin declared dramatically. In the presence of royalty, the other agreed. "Shut up, you two," Ron growled as he joined them minutes later, having been sorted into Gryffindor as well. Once the sorting concluded, Dumbledore rose to his feet. The elderly headmaster spread his arms wide in welcome, beaming at the students. "Welcome to a new year at Hogwarts. Before we begin our banquet, I would like to acknowledge the historic nature of this term. For the first time in a millennium, Hogwarts welcomes not only a new group of students, but also the magical crown." All eyes turned to Harry, who tried not to shrink in his seat. "While at school, His Majesty has expressed the wish to be treated as any other student," Dumbledore continued. "I trust you will all respect this admirable desire, while also honoring the profound magical significance of his presence among us. Now, let the feast begin." Food appeared on the golden plates, and conversation resumed at a deafening volume. Harry was grateful for Ron, Hermione, and Neville, who formed a buffer between him and the countless students trying to catch his eye or engage him in conversation. "Is it true you live in a castle that appeared out of nowhere?" Seamus Finnegan asked from across the table. "Avalon Castle," Harry confirmed. "It was hidden until the coronation." "And is that really a royal phoenix?" Lavender Brown asked, staring at Luminaris, who was now perched on the back of Harry's chair, occasionally stealing bits of chicken from his plate. "His name is Luminaris," Harry said, stroking the phoenix's warm feathers. "He chose me the day of the coronation." "The hat called you heir to 4 houses," Hermione said thoughtfully. "I understood Gryffindor, Slytherin, and Potter, but what's Peverell?" "An ancient wizarding family known for powerful death magic," supplied Percy Weasley, Ron's older brother and a Gryffindor prefect. "They're mentioned in The Tales of Beedle the Bard, connected to the Deathly Hallows legend." Harry was saved from explaining further by a commotion at the Hufflepuff table. A ghost in medieval clothing had risen through the floor, spotted Harry, and was now gliding rapidly toward the Gryffindor table, followed by the other house ghosts. "Your Majesty," the ghost said, stopping before Harry and executing a formal bow that sent his plumed hat floating several inches above his transparent head. "Sir Nicholas de Mimsy Porpington, at your service. The Hogwarts ghosts wish to pledge our loyalty to the crown." As the other ghosts assembled behind Sir Nicholas, the Fat Friar of Hufflepuff, the Grey Lady of Ravenclaw, and even the Bloody Baron of Slytherin, Harry noticed they appeared more solid, their translucent forms gaining definition and a faint shimmer of color. "Your presence strengthens us," the Grey Lady explained, noticing Harry's curious gaze. "The magic of the crown has always had a special relationship with those who linger between worlds." "Thank you for your loyalty," Harry said, uncomfortably aware of the entire hall watching this exchange. "I'm honored to receive it." The ghosts bowed in unison before drifting back to their respective tables, leaving Harry to face renewed stares and whispers. Fortunately, dessert appeared at that moment, providing a welcome distraction. As the feast concluded, Dumbledore rose again to give the start-of-term notices, warning students away from the Forbidden Forest and a third-floor corridor, unless you wish to die a very painful death, which Harry thought was oddly specific. "And now," Dumbledore concluded, "let us sing the school song." After the cacophonous rendition, ended by the Weasley twins' funeral march tempo, Percy began guiding the Gryffindor first-years toward their dormitory. Harry moved to follow, but Professor McGonagall intercepted him. "Mr. Potter, that is, Your Majesty," she corrected herself, looking slightly flustered, "the headmaster would like to speak with you briefly before you retire." Harry nodded, bidding goodnight to his friends with promises to see them in the morning. He followed McGonagall toward the staff table, where Dumbledore waited with several other professors. "Harry," Dumbledore greeted him warmly, "allow me to formally introduce you to your heads of house. Professor McGonagall you know, of course, as Deputy Headmistress and Head of Gryffindor House." McGonagall inclined her head respectfully, her stern expression softening slightly. "Professor Snape," Dumbledore continued, gesturing to the hook-nosed man with greasy black hair, "is head of Slytherin House and our potions master." Snape's black eyes bored into Harry with an intensity that was almost physical. He gave the barest nod of acknowledgement, his lips pressed into a thin line. Harry felt a strange prickling sensation at his temples as their eyes met, and Luminaris shifted on his shoulder, feathers rustling uneasily. Professor Flitwick, head of Ravenclaw and Charms Master, Dumbledore indicated a tiny wizard who bowed so low his long beard brushed the floor. "An honor, Your Majesty," Flitwick squeaked. "Simply extraordinary magical circumstances." "And Professor Sprout, head of Hufflepuff and herbology expert," Dumbledore finished, gesturing to a squat witch with flyaway grey hair and earth-stained robes. "Welcome to Hogwarts, dear," Professor Sprout said warmly, giving Harry a kind smile that reminded him, oddly, of the sun breaking through clouds. "The castle's reaction to your presence has been most remarkable," Dumbledore observed, his blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. "It appears Hogwarts recognizes its heir more profoundly than anyone anticipated." "Indeed," McGonagall agreed. "The changes to the Great Hall alone are unprecedented. Which raises an interesting question of accommodation, Dumbledore continued. While you have been sorted into Gryffindor, the castle itself appears to be making other arrangements. Harry frowned. What do you mean? If you would follow me, Dumbledore invited, I believe Hogwarts has a surprise for you. The headmaster led Harry and the four heads of house from the Great Hall, through corridors where torches flared brighter as they passed, up staircases that aligned themselves perfectly to create the most direct path, until they reached an unfamiliar corridor on the 7th floor. This section of the castle has been sealed for centuries, Dumbledore explained, stopping before a blank wall. According to legend, it housed the private quarters of the founders themselves. As Harry approached the wall, his Gryffindor and Slytherin rings began to glow brightly. A seam appeared in the stone, widening to reveal an ornate door that hadn't existed seconds before. The door was divided diagonally, one half carved from rich red wood with gold fittings, the other from dark ebony with silver accents. The Founder's Wing, McGonagall breathed. It's been lost since before I was a student here. The door swung open at Harry's touch, revealing a magnificent common room beyond. Unlike the house common rooms, which were decorated exclusively in their house colors, this space harmoniously blended elements from all four houses, Gryffindor red and gold, Slytherin green and silver, Ravenclaw blue and bronze, Hufflepuff yellow and black. A central fireplace roared to life as they entered, and along the walls, portraits stirred from centuries of slumber. Welcome, Heir, said a deep, resonant voice. A portrait above the mantelpiece depicted a powerfully built wizard with a lion emblem on his robes, Godric Gryffindor himself. Hogwarts has awaited your return for many long years. Beside him, in separate frames, three other figures awakened, a stern-looking witch with an eagle emblem, Rowena Ravenclaw, a plump, kind-faced witch beside a badger, Helga Hufflepuff, and a shrewd, aristocratic wizard with serpent embellishments on his robes, Salazar Slytherin. The founders, Flitwick squeaked, looking faint with academic excitement. The actual founders. Not merely their descendant, but king as well, Slytherin observed, his sharp eyes assessing Harry. Interesting times lie ahead, it seems. The castle has prepared your quarters, Hufflepuff said warmly. Through that door, dear. You'll find everything you need. Harry turned to see another door, this one bearing his royal crest, which opened to reveal a bedchamber even grander than his suite at Avalon. A four-poster bed draped in Gryffindor colors dominated one end, while a study area with a massive desk filled the other. Two additional doors led to what appeared to be a private bathroom and a small meeting room. It seems, Dumbledore observed mildly, that Hogwarts has decided you should have accommodations befitting your status, while still honoring your request to be treated as a normal student. These rooms connect directly to the Gryffindor dormitories, Ravenclaw's portrait explained. You may come and go between them at will. The door will appear to you alone, unless you choose to reveal it to others. This solves our dilemma rather neatly, McGonagall said approvingly. You may sleep here or in the Gryffindor dormitory as you prefer, Your Majesty. Harry considered this. While the private quarters were spectacular, he didn't want to isolate himself from his peers. I think I'll use the Gryffindor dormitory most nights, he decided. But it's good to have a private space for royal business, I suppose. Snape, who had remained silent throughout this exploration, finally spoke. How convenient that the castle provides special treatment for its celebrity resident. His voice was soft but cold, with a faint sneer evident in his tone. Careful, Severus, Slytherin's portrait warned. You speak to the crown, not merely a student. Snape's sallow face paled slightly, but his expression remained fixed in barely disguised contempt. I believe that's enough excitement for one evening, Dumbledore interjected smoothly. You have classes tomorrow, Harry. Professor McGonagall can show you the passage to the Gryffindor dormitory. As the other professors departed, Dumbledore lingered a moment longer. Harry, he said quietly, while you're exploring your unique relationship with Hogwarts, I would caution restraint. The castle's magic is ancient and powerful, but not always predictable. Harry nodded, though he wasn't entirely sure what Dumbledore was warning him against. The headmaster smiled benignly and swept from the room, leaving Harry to marvel at the remarkable turn his first evening at Hogwarts had taken. Following McGonagall's guidance, he found the hidden passage that led directly to the first-year boys' dormitory in Gryffindor Tower. Ron, Neville, Seamus, and Dean Thomas were already in their pajamas, exclaiming over the discovery that Harry's trunk had mysteriously appeared beside a fifth bed despite rumors he'd be housed separately. "The castle knew I wanted to stay here," Harry explained, touched by Hogwarts' apparent consideration for his wishes. "I have private quarters as well, but I'd rather sleep here with you lot, if that's all right." "Brilliant!" Ron exclaimed. "Wait till I tell Fred and George, they've been taking bets on whether you'd have a royal tower all to yourself." As Harry changed into his pajamas and climbed into the unexpectedly comfortable four-poster bed, he felt a contentment he'd never experienced at Privet Drive. The castle hummed around him, a living presence that welcomed and protected him. His new friends chatted nearby, treating him with a comfortable familiarity that soothed his fears of isolation. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, a soft trill alerted him to Luminaris's arrival. The phoenix settled on a perch that had appeared beside Harry's bed, another thoughtful provision from the castle. "Good night," Harry whispered to his feathered companion, and by extension, to Hogwarts itself. The castle seemed to sigh around him, stones settling and magic flowing through ancient walls, pleased to have its heir home at last. Harry's first week at Hogwarts was a whirlwind of new experiences, challenging classes, and the constant adjustments required by his dual role as student and king. Each day brought fresh reminders of his unique position, from the way the castle continued to respond to his presence to the varying reactions of his professors and peers. In Charms, Professor Flitwick squeaked excitedly when Harry's name was called during roll and toppled off the stack of books he stood on. In Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall treated Harry exactly like any other student, a normalcy he deeply appreciated, especially when she transformed her desk into a pig and back, promising they would eventually learn similar impressive feats. Herbology proved unexpectedly interesting, not least because several rare plants in the greenhouse seemed to bloom the moment Harry entered, much to Professor Sprout's astonishment. "They sense your magic, your majesty," she explained, watching as a Flutterby bush trembled with unusual vigor. "Plants are more sensitive to magical auras than most wizards realize." Defense against the dark arts was a disappointment. Professor Quirrell, a nervous man with a pronounced stutter and a turban that smelled strongly of garlic, seemed terrified of his own subject. More troublingly, Harry developed a sharp headache whenever Quirrell's back was turned to the class, which happened frequently as the professor wrote on the blackboard. On Friday morning, Harry received his first official correspondence as king, a stack of documents delivered by three important-looking owls bearing the Gringotts seal, the Ministry of Magic emblem, and the crest of the International Confederation of Wizards, respectively. The papers required his review and royal seal on matters ranging from diplomatic appointments to the finalization of trade agreements negotiated during the previous regime. "Bit much for breakfast reading," Ron observed as Harry sorted through the parchments. "I'm supposed to respond to all of these by Monday," Harry groaned. "And we've still got double potions with Slytherin today." "You should establish regular office hours," Hermione suggested practically. "Perhaps Sunday afternoons. That way you can focus on schoolwork the rest of the time." "Office hours," Harry repeated. "Like a professor." "Like a king with responsibilities," Hermione corrected. "You need a structured approach or you'll be overwhelmed." By the time they headed to the dungeons for potions, Harry had drafted a schedule that balanced his royal duties with his studies, assuming, of course, that the outside world respected his boundaries, which seemed increasingly unlikely as the implications of a magical monarchy continued to ripple through wizarding society. Potions class proved to be everything Harry had feared from his brief introduction to Professor Snape. The potions master's entrance was dramatic, billowing robes, commanding presence, and a silky voice that held the class in fearful silence. Like Flitwick, he paused at Harry's name during roll call, but rather than excitement, his reaction was cold contempt. "Ah, yes," he said softly, "Harry Potter. Our new celebrity. Or should I say, our new monarch. The Slytherins sniggered behind their hands. Malfoy looked particularly smug. Tell me, Potter, Snape continued, what would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Hermione's hand shot into the air, but Harry, to his own surprise, knew the answer. The Slytherin grimoire he'd been studying contained extensive potion knowledge. The draught of living death, sir, he replied. A powerful sleeping potion. Something like surprise flickered across Snape's face before his expression hardened again. Where would you look if I told you to find a bezoar? Again, Harry knew this. The stomach of a goat, sir. It will save you from most poisons. Snape's eyes narrowed dangerously. What is the difference, Potter, between monkshood and wolfsbane? They're the same plant, sir, Harry answered. Also called aconite. A tense silence followed. Snape's lip curled in what might have been a sneer, a grimace, or something else entirely. It seems fame isn't everything, he said finally. Or perhaps your majesty received special tutoring before gracing us with your royal presence. Before Harry could respond, something unprecedented happened. The flames beneath the cauldrons at the front of the classroom flared higher, changing from orange to a blue-green color reminiscent of Harry's phoenix. A soft rumble vibrated through the stone floor beneath their feet, and the dungeon door, which Snape had dramatically slammed shut at the beginning of class, swung open of its own accord. Snape paled visibly. It seems, he said in a strained voice, that the castle objects to my teaching methods. He turned abruptly and strode to the blackboard. Instructions are on the board. You will brew a simple potion to cure boils. Begin. The remainder of the class passed in tense silence. Harry partnered with Ron, while Hermione worked with Neville at the next table. Snape swept around the dungeon, criticizing almost everyone except Malfoy, whom he seemed to favor. He made no further direct comments to Harry, though his dark eyes frequently darted to the still open door, as if expecting further interference from the castle. When the bell finally rang, Harry was among the first to leave, eager to escape the oppressive atmosphere. Ron and Hermione hurried after him. That was brilliant. Ron exclaimed once they were safely up the dungeon stairs. The castle literally told Snape off. Did you see his face? I didn't do it on purpose, Harry said, though he'd felt the castle's anger rising with his own discomfort. It just happened. The founders must have built protective enchantments into Hogwarts, Hermione theorized. As heir to two of them, those protections extend to you. Harry frowned, remembering Dumbledore's warning about the castle's unpredictable magic. I don't want special treatment from the castle. It'll just make professors like Snape resent me more. Snape already resents you, Ron pointed out. Did you see how he looked at you? Like you'd personally offended him somehow. They were interrupted by Hagrid's invitation to tea that afternoon, a welcome distraction from the troubling potions class. Harry tucked the note away, looking forward to catching up with the friendly gamekeeper. As they crossed the entrance hall toward lunch, they encountered an unexpected sight, Draco Malfoy, alone, waiting beside the marble staircase. The blond boy straightened when he spotted Harry, his usual sneering confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic uncertainty. Your Majesty, Malfoy said formally, might I have a word? In private? Ron bristled immediately. Whatever you have to say to Harry, you can say in front of us. Malfoy's pale cheeks flushed slightly. This is a matter concerning ancient family obligations that predates our personal disagreements. Harry hesitated, then nodded. It's all right, Ron. I'll meet you in the Great Hall in a few minutes. Ron looked dubious but retreated with Hermione, both glancing back suspiciously as they left. Malfoy led Harry to an empty classroom nearby, checking carefully to ensure they weren't overheard. I've received a letter from my father, Malfoy began without preamble. The Malfoy family finds itself in an unusual position following your coronation. How so? Harry asked cautiously. Malfoy's expression was conflicted. Our family has certain magical obligations to the crown, oaths made centuries ago that have been dormant until now. My father felt these oaths had effectively ended with the magical monarchy, but since your coronation, the family magic has reawakened. What kind of oaths? Protection and service, Malfoy replied. The Malfoys were traditionally responsible for intelligence gathering and diplomatic missions on behalf of the crown. We cultivated connections and monitored potential threats from abroad. He straightened proudly. We were the crown's eyes and ears in places others couldn't access. Harry processed this information slowly. And now your family magic is compelling you to fulfill this role again? Malfoy nodded stiffly. My father finds the situation complicated, given recent history. But the magic is undeniable. He's instructed me to offer you our service, as tradition demands. Harry studied Malfoy carefully, noting the inner conflict evident in his tense posture. This was clearly difficult for the proud Slytherin. What about your personal feelings? Your father's instructions aside, where do you stand? Malfoy looked startled by the direct question. That is. He hesitated, then continued with unexpected honesty, I was raised to believe in certain values. Blood purity. Slytherin superiority. The natural order of things. Your existence as king disrupts some of those beliefs, but confirms others. I'm reconciling these contradictions. And in the meantime? In the meantime, Malfoy said with a touch of his usual confidence, I'd be a fool to ignore family magic and centuries of tradition. The Malfoys have always been pragmatists above all else. Harry considered this carefully. Having Malfoy as an ally, even a reluctant one, could be valuable, especially given his connections to families that might otherwise oppose Harry's rule. And if ancient family magic was compelling the Malfoys to serve the crown, that obligation might override Lucius Malfoy's more unsavory allegiances. All right, Harry decided. I accept your family's service, with conditions. First, honesty, I need accurate information, not what you think I want to hear. Second, discretion, our arrangement stays between us for now. And third, he added, meeting Malfoy's gray eyes directly, respect for all magical beings, regardless of blood status or species. I won't have representatives of the crown spreading hateful ideas. Malfoy looked like he wanted to object to the third condition but instead gave a curt nod. Acceptable terms, Your Majesty. My father will be informed of your requirements. One more thing, Harry added. At school, when it's just classwork or Quidditch or normal student stuff, I'm just Harry. The whole, Your Majesty, business gets old fast. A faint smile flickered across Malfoy's face. As you wish. Harry. Though maintaining appearances with our respective housemates may require some creative antagonism. Agreed, Harry said with a small smile of his own. Wouldn't want anyone thinking Gryffindor and Slytherin are getting along. They parted with a formal handshake, both aware that something significant had shifted between them. As Harry headed to the Great Hall to rejoin his friends, he reflected on the strange alliances forming around him, not all of them of his choosing, but each shaped by magic and tradition older than Hogwarts itself. The weekend brought Harry's first opportunity to explore his royal quarters more thoroughly. While he continued to sleep in the Gryffindor dormitory, the Founders' Wing offered privacy for studying and, as Hermione had suggested, holding office hours for his royal correspondence. The common room had adjusted to reflect Harry's preferences, maintaining its blend of the four houses' colors but adding comfortable seating similar to the Gryffindor common room. The Founders' portraits were both fascinating and invaluable resources, each offering different perspectives on Hogwarts, magic, and governance. Godric Gryffindor was boisterous and straightforward, full of tales of magical duels and heroic deeds. Rowena Ravenclaw spoke at length about magical theory and the educational principles underlying Hogwarts creation. Helga Hufflepuff offered practical advice on managing responsibilities and maintaining balance. And Salazar Slytherin, contrary to his fearsome reputation, proved to be a shrewd political advisor, albeit one with complicated views on blood purity that had evolved somewhat after centuries of observation. The issue was never Muggleborns themselves, Slytherin's portrait explained when Harry broached the sensitive subject. It was the risk they posed to our world's secrecy in less enlightened times. Parents and siblings who might report witchcraft, children untrained in controlling their magic, these were genuine concerns in my day, when magic users were burned at the stake. But you still believed purebloods were superior, Harry challenged. Slytherin's portrait gave a considering nod. I believed magical heritage carried advantages, knowledge passed down through generations, natural affinity refined by selective marriage. But I've watched 1,000 years of students pass through these halls, young king. The evidence does not support the extremes my name has become associated with. On Sunday afternoon, Harry invited Ron, Hermione, and Neville to join him in the Founder's Wing for his first official, court session. Ron brought his wizard's chess set, the ancient one he'd mentioned on the train, which had indeed awakened at Harry's coronation. Hermione arrived with carefully organized notes on the royal correspondence Harry needed to address. Neville came with a potted plant as a chamber-warming gift, explaining shyly that it was a rare royal thornbloom that bloomed only in the presence of ruling magic. Gran nearly fainted when it started flowering in our greenhouse the day after your coronation, Neville explained as the plant unfurled crimson petals that seemed to shimmer like tiny crowns. It's been in the Longbottom family for 12 generations without a single bloom. As they settled into their tasks, Harry reviewing and signing documents with Hermione's guidance, Ron analyzing the strategic implications of a proposed trade agreement with magical Egypt, and Neville consulting with Helga Hufflepuff's portrait about magical plants with royal associations, Harry felt a sense of rightness in their collaboration. We should make this regular, he suggested as the afternoon progressed. Sunday sessions to handle the royal business, so it doesn't interfere with schoolwork. The traditional royal council included representatives from all magical backgrounds, Ravenclaw's portrait observed. Your friends embody this diversity, pureblood families both aligned and neutral during the last conflict, Muggleborn perspective, varied magical talents. We're not a proper council, Ron objected, ears reddening. We're just helping Harry with his homework. Governance is not so different from homework, Mr. Weasley, Gryffindor's portrait boomed. Both require attention to detail, application of knowledge, and the wisdom to seek assistance when needed. Their discussion was interrupted by a soft chime from the wall beside the fireplace. A section of stone transformed into a mirror, showing the corridor outside. Someone approaches, Slytherin's portrait announced. Professor Dumbledore, accompanied by, interesting. The mirror showed Dumbledore walking toward the Founder's Wing, accompanied by a severe-looking elderly witch whom Harry didn't recognize. She wore formal robes of deep purple with silver embroidery, and her white hair was arranged in an elaborate style that suggested importance. That's Madame Marchbanks, Hermione gasped. She's the head of the Wizarding Examinations Authority and one of the oldest members of the Wizengamot. The Marchbanks family were traditionally keepers of the royal records, Hufflepuff's portrait added. They maintained the official chronicles of magical governance. Harry quickly set aside the trade agreement he'd been reviewing. I should receive them formally, shouldn't I? Indeed, Slytherin agreed. Your friends should remain unless the visitors request privacy. The presence of witnesses protects both crown and petitioners. Harry straightened his robes, ordinary school robes, though the castle had subtly enhanced them with golden embroidery along the edges, and nodded to the door, which swung open at his silent command. Dumbledore entered first, eyes twinkling as he took in the scene of Harry and his friends surrounded by books, parchments, and the attentive portraits of the founders. Good afternoon, Harry. I see you've discovered the advantages of your private quarters. Hello, Professor, Harry greeted him. We were just handling some royal correspondence. So I see, Dumbledore smiled. May I introduce Madame Griselda Marchbanks? She has served the wizarding world in various capacities for over a century and has requested an audience. Madame Marchbanks stepped forward, studying Harry with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Then, to everyone's surprise, she sank into a deep, formal curtsy despite her advanced age. Your Majesty, she said, her voice cracking slightly with emotion. I never thought to live long enough to speak those words again. Please, rise, Harry said, uncomfortable with the elderly witch's deference. And please sit down. Can I offer you tea? As if responding to his question, a silver tea service appeared on a side table, steam rising gently from the pot. Hufflepuff's portrait smiled approvingly at the castle's attentiveness. Once they were all seated, Harry in a chair that had subtly transformed into a more throne-like version of itself, Madame Marchbanks explained her visit. I come representing the Marchbanks family, Your Majesty, to offer our traditional service as royal chroniclers. For 27 generations, my family recorded the deeds and decisions of magical monarchs, maintaining the official historical record. She withdrew a small object from her robes, a silver key that gleamed with magical energy. This key opens the royal archives, sealed since the last king's disappearance. The archives contain the complete recorded history of magical monarchy in Britain, including laws, treaties, and precedents that may prove valuable in re-establishing proper governance. Harry accepted the key carefully. It felt warm in his palm, recognizing his magical signature. Thank you, Madame Marchbanks. I would be honored to have your family resume this role. The elderly witch beamed with pride. The archives are housed within the Ministry building, though they exist independent of Ministry authority, a magical space created specifically for royal records. This key will transport you directly there when you wish to access them. Harry has been organizing regular Sunday sessions to address royal business, Hermione volunteered. Perhaps you could join us next week to provide historical context for some of the decisions facing him. Madame Marchbanks looked delighted by the invitation. I would be honored, Miss Granger. Hermione Granger. Ah, yes. Professor McGonagall has mentioned your exceptional academic performance. Marchbanks turned back to Harry. You choose your advisors wisely, Your Majesty. Intelligence, loyalty, and diverse perspectives will serve you well. The conversation shifted to more specific matters, pending Wisengamot legislation that required royal review, historical precedents for various diplomatic arrangements, and the complex process of reintegrating monarchical authority into a system that had operated without it for a millennium. Throughout the discussion, Harry noticed Dumbledore watching with thoughtful eyes, occasionally offering clarifications but mostly observing the dynamic between Harry and his friends. The headmaster seemed particularly interested in the founders' portraits, directing several questions to Ravenclaw about educational theory and to Slytherin about the original protective enchantments on the castle. As the meeting concluded, Dumbledore lingered behind while Madame Marchbanks took her leave, promising to return the following Sunday with relevant historical documents. You're adapting remarkably well to your circumstances, Harry, Dumbledore observed once they were alone. Though I must caution against taking on too many responsibilities at once. Your education should remain your primary focus. That's why we're limiting royal business to Sundays, Harry explained. Hermione helped me create a schedule that balances everything. Miss Granger has an exceptional organizational mind, Dumbledore agreed. Though I wonder if she fully appreciates the potential scope of magical kingship. He glanced at the portraits of the founders. The crown's authority extends to areas few modern witches and wizards remember. Like what? Harry asked cautiously. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. Magic itself responds to the rightful monarch in ways that can be unpredictable. Hogwarts is merely the most visible example. You've no doubt noticed the castle's responsiveness to your presence. Harry nodded, thinking of the opening doors, brightening torches, and the incident with Snape in potions class. This connection will likely grow stronger as you spend more time here, Dumbledore continued. The founders built Hogwarts not just as a school, but as a seat of magical power, a nexus point where ley lines converge beneath the foundations. As heir to two founders and magical king, your connection to these energies is unique. Is that dangerous? Harry asked, remembering the rumble of stone when the castle had intervened in potions. Not dangerous, precisely, Dumbledore hedged, but potentially disruptive if not properly channeled. I would suggest you begin studying the basics of magical control with Professor Flitwick. He has experience with unusually powerful magical cores in young witches and wizards. Harry agreed to the extra lessons, though he sensed Dumbledore wasn't sharing everything he knew about the situation. The headmaster's careful phrasing suggested concerns beyond mere magical education. After Dumbledore departed, Harry rejoined his friends, who had tactfully moved to the other side of the common room during his private conversation with the headmaster. "What was that about?" Ron asked. Harry explained Dumbledore's suggestion about additional training with Flitwick. "He seems worried about my connection to the castle getting too strong or something." "That's not surprising," Hermione said thoughtfully. "The historical accounts of magical monarchs mention their ability to command not just people but magical forces themselves. Some texts suggest the last king's disappearance coincided with a magical catastrophe, perhaps a loss of control." "Great," Harry muttered. "So I'm not just learning to be a wizard and a king, but also how not to accidentally cause a magical disaster." "Look on the bright side," Ron suggested. "If Snape gets nasty again, maybe the castle will drop a chandelier on him." Harry laughed despite himself, grateful for friends who could find humor in his increasingly complicated situation. As the evening approached and they prepared to return to their regular dormitories, he felt more confident about the challenges ahead. With friends like these, historical guidance from the founders, and the castle itself as an ally, perhaps he could navigate this unexpected role after all. The following week established a new routine for Harry: classes during the day, occasional private lessons with Flitwick in the evenings, and continued exploration of the castle with his friends during free periods. The Hogwarts Founders Wing became their unofficial headquarters, a place where they could study without interruption and discuss matters that might raise eyebrows in more public settings. Flitwick's special lessons proved fascinating. The tiny charms professor was delighted by Harry's unique magical situation and approached their sessions with infectious enthusiasm. "Most wizards, Your Majesty, never need to consciously direct their internal magic," Flitwick explained during their first lesson. "Wands and incantations provide natural channeling mechanisms. But in your case, your magic is connecting directly with Hogwarts, with or without your conscious intent." The exercises Flitwick prescribed were subtle: meditation techniques to develop awareness of magical currents, simple wandless charms to practice precise control, and methods for dampening magical output when emotions ran high. "The castle responds most strongly to your emotional states," the professor observed after Harry accidentally caused all the books in the classroom to rearrange themselves during a moment of frustration. "Your conscious control will improve with practice, but managing emotional reactions requires different skills entirely." Meanwhile, classes continued with varying degrees of success. Transfiguration remained challenging but rewarding under McGonagall's exacting standards. Herbology improved as Harry's connection to magical plants deepened. History of magic was universally acknowledged as the perfect opportunity for naps, with Professor Binns droning endlessly about goblin rebellions without acknowledging the most significant magical event in centuries, Harry's coronation. Potions continued to be tense, though Snape had modified his approach after the castle's intervention. Rather than directly targeting Harry, he now simply ignored him completely, neither criticizing nor acknowledging his work. The Slytherin students followed their head's example, with one notable exception, Draco Malfoy, who maintained a public facade of disdain while occasionally slipping Harry discreet notes containing information gleaned from his father's correspondence. One such note, passed during a particularly tedious potions class, contained a warning: Minister Fudge forming Royal Advisory Committee, all political opponents of the Crown. Designed to limit your authority through guidance. Father advises formal rejection before committee gains legitimacy. Harry shared this information with his friends during their next meeting in the Founders' Wing. Classic political maneuvering, Ron observed, studying the chessboard where he was teaching Harry a variation of wizard's chess supposedly invented by a 12th century royal battlemaster. "Fudge can't oppose you directly, so he's creating a buffer between you and your authority. We should research historical precedent," Hermione suggested, already reaching for a reference book. "There must be proper protocols for establishing royal advisors that would supersede the Ministers' Committee." "There are indeed," confirmed a new voice from the doorway. Professor McGonagall stood there, holding several scrolls. "Forgive the interruption, Your Majesty, but I've discovered some relevant information in the restricted section that may interest you." Harry invited her to join them, curious about what had prompted the typically reserved professor to seek him out directly. McGonagall placed the scrolls carefully on the table, her expression unusually animated. "After witnessing the castle's intervention in Professor Snape's classroom, I became curious about Hogwarts' historical relationship with magical governance. These scrolls contain the original charter establishing Hogwarts, signed by the monarch of the time." She unrolled the first document, revealing ancient parchment covered in faded script. According to this, Hogwarts was founded not merely as a school, but as the magical heart of Britain, a neutral ground where the crown, magical families, and creatures of all kinds could gather in safety. So the school was secondary to its role as a seat of government? Hermione asked, fascinated. "Initially, yes," McGonagall confirmed. "The educational purpose grew over time, eventually becoming primary as the monarchy faded. But the original enchantments remain, which explains why the castle responds so strongly to His Majesty's presence." Harry studied the document, recognizing the signatures of all 4 founders at the bottom, along with an elaborate royal seal he couldn't identify. "What does this mean practically? For Hogwarts now, I mean." McGonagall's expression grew serious. "It means, Mr. Potter, that as both heir to 2 founders and magical king, your authority within these walls technically supersedes even the headmasters, a fact I doubt Professor Dumbledore has emphasized in your conversations." Harry felt a jolt of surprise. No, Dumbledore certainly hadn't mentioned that particular detail. "But I don't want to interfere with how the school is run," he protested. "I'm here to learn, not to take over." "A commendable attitude," McGonagall said approvingly. "However, knowing the extent of your connection to Hogwarts may help explain why the castle intervenes on your behalf, and could assist Professor Flitwick in his efforts to help you manage that connection." The conversation was interrupted by a familiar trill as Luminaris appeared in a flash of fire, circling the room once before landing on the back of Harry's chair. The phoenix appeared agitated, ruffling his feathers and singing a short, urgent note. "What's wrong?" Harry asked, instinctively understanding that his companion was trying to communicate something important. Luminaris trilled again, and a series of images flashed through Harry's mind. The 3rd-floor corridor Dumbledore had declared off-limits, a massive 3-headed dog, and beneath its paws, a trapdoor emitting a sickly dark aura. "There's something wrong on the 3rd floor," Harry translated for the others. "Behind the forbidden door. Something dangerous." McGonagall's lips thinned to a white line. "The headmaster has placed certain security measures in that corridor. They should not be interfering with the castle's magic, however." "It's not the security itself," Harry said slowly, still processing the impressions from Luminaris. "It's something underneath, something dark that doesn't belong in Hogwarts." A concerned expression crossed McGonagall's face. "I should inform the headmaster of this immediately." "No," Harry said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "At least, not yet. First, I need to see it for myself. The castle is trying to show me something important." McGonagall looked torn between her respect for Harry's position and her responsibility as deputy headmistress. "Your Majesty, the security measures are genuinely dangerous. A Cerberus guards the entrance, and beyond that, a Cerberus?" Hermione exclaimed. "At a school. Hagrid's always wanted one of those," Ron recalled. "He told us on the train, remember? Said they were misunderstood." Harry stood decisively. "If there's something dangerous in the castle, my castle, apparently, I need to know what it is. Professor, would you accompany us to ensure we navigate the security safely?" McGonagall hesitated, then gave a reluctant nod. "I suppose direct royal intervention supersedes headmaster's orders in this case. But I must insist we proceed with extreme caution." The group made their way to the 3rd-floor corridor, Luminaris flying ahead as a silent guide. The castle seemed to assist their journey, shifting staircases to create the most direct path and ensuring they encountered no other students or staff along the way. The forbidden corridor was dark and dusty, with an oppressive silence that pressed against their ears. At the end stood a door that looked ordinary enough, though Harry could feel a faint vibration in the floor beneath it, as if something large moved on the other side. "The Cerberus responds to music," McGonagall explained, drawing her wand. "Stand back, please." She conjured a small music box that began playing a gentle lullaby, then carefully opened the door. Inside, just as Luminaris had shown, was an enormous three-headed dog. All three heads were already drooping as the music reached them, massive eyelids sliding closed over dinner plate-sized eyes. "Bloody hell," Ron whispered, staring at the creature with a mixture of horror and fascination. As the Cerberus slumped into sleep, Harry noticed the trapdoor beneath its paws. Luminaris flew to hover above it, glowing feathers illuminating the wooden surface. "That's what's bothering him," Harry said. "Something down there doesn't belong in Hogwarts." "The headmaster has arranged a series of protections," McGonagall admitted. "There is an item of significant magical importance being safeguarded here temporarily." "The Philosopher's Stone," Hermione gasped, then clapped a hand over her mouth. McGonagall's eyebrows shot up. "Miss Granger, how could you possibly? It was in the Daily Prophet over the summer," Hermione explained hurriedly. "A break-in at Gringotts, Vault 713, but nothing was taken because the vault had been emptied earlier that same day. And then Hagrid mentioned retrieving something important from Gringotts for Professor Dumbledore when he took Harry shopping." She looked at Harry apologetically. "I connected the dots." "Impressive deductive reasoning, Miss Granger," McGonagall said dryly, "if somewhat concerning from a security perspective." Harry approached the trapdoor cautiously. As he drew nearer, his scar began to prickle uncomfortably, not pain exactly, but a sensation of wrongness that intensified with proximity. "It's not just the stone causing the problem," he said slowly. "There's something else, something dark. The castle is rejecting it." McGonagall looked alarmed. "What do you mean, rejecting it?" "Hogwarts is semi-sentient," Harry explained, recalling what the founders' portraits had told him. "It recognizes threats to its magic. Whatever's down there is setting off its defenses." As if confirming his words, the stones beneath their feet trembled slightly. Dust sifted down from the ceiling, and the torches along the corridor flickered. "We should return to the headmaster's office immediately," McGonagall decided. "This situation requires his attention." Harry agreed reluctantly. While part of him wanted to investigate further, the growing discomfort in his scar and the castle's increasingly agitated response suggested prudence was the better course. They carefully backed away from the sleeping Cerberus and closed the door. As they made their way to the headmaster's office, Harry noticed the castle seemed to be directing their path. Corridors that should have turned left went right instead, and staircases moved with unusual purpose, delivering them to their destination in half the expected time. The gargoyle guarding Dumbledore's office sprang aside without a password as they approached, another sign of the castle's intervention. They climbed the spiral staircase to find the headmaster seated behind his desk, apparently unsurprised by their arrival. "Ah, Minerva, Harry," Dumbledore greeted them, his blue eyes moving from McGonagall to Harry and then to Luminaris, who had perched on Harry's shoulder. "And friends. I see Hogwarts has been revealing its secrets. The castle is rejecting something beneath the third-floor corridor," Albus, McGonagall said without preamble. "His Majesty's Phoenix detected it, and the castle's reaction confirms there's a genuine threat." Dumbledore's expression grew serious. "Indeed? That is, concerning." He turned to Harry. "What exactly did you sense, Harry?" Harry described the sensation, the wrongness, the prickling in his scar, and the castle's increasingly physical response. "Luminaris showed me images of the corridor and what's beneath it. Something down there doesn't belong in Hogwarts. The stone itself should not cause such a reaction," Dumbledore mused. "It is a powerful magical artifact, certainly, but benign in nature." "It's not the stone," Harry insisted. It's something else, something dark. Dumbledore steepled his fingers, looking troubled. I designed the protections myself, with assistance from the staff. There should be nothing unexpected within the secured area. Unless someone has already breached the outer defenses, Hermione suggested tentatively. The headmaster's eyes sharpened. An astute observation, Miss Granger. He rose from his desk. I believe a thorough inspection is warranted. Minerva, please alert the other heads of house. Harry, I must ask you and your friends to return to your dormitories while we investigate. No, Harry said firmly, surprising himself again with the authority in his voice. If there's a threat to Hogwarts, I need to be there. The castle is responding to me, I might be able to help identify what's wrong. Dumbledore and McGonagall exchanged glances. This is highly irregular, Albus, McGonagall said. But given the circumstances. Very well, Dumbledore conceded, though Harry sensed reluctance beneath his agreeable tone. Harry may accompany us. The rest of you, however, must remain here until our return. Ron looked ready to argue, but Hermione placed a restraining hand on his arm. We'll wait, she promised, though her eyes conveyed a silent message to Harry, be careful. As Harry followed Dumbledore and McGonagall from the office, he felt the weight of responsibility settling more firmly on his shoulders. Hogwarts was more than just his school now, it was responding to him as its rightful master, showing him threats and seeking his protection. The abstract concept of magical kingship was becoming increasingly concrete, manifesting in ways he hadn't anticipated when he first placed those Heir rings on his fingers. Whatever lay ahead in the forbidden corridor, Harry knew this was just the beginning of the castle awakening to his presence, and to the responsibilities that came with being not just a student, but an heir to the founders and the magical king that Hogwarts had been waiting 1,000 years to welcome home. Chapter 3, The King's Challenge. Harry followed Dumbledore and McGonagall down the spiral staircase, his mind racing as fast as his heartbeat. Luminaris glided silently above them, the phoenix's soft glow illuminating the way. As they reached the bottom, Professor Snape emerged from the shadows, his dark eyes narrowing at the sight of Harry. Headmaster, Snape acknowledged with a slight inclination of his head. I received Minerva's message. Is it wise to involve certain parties in this matter? His gaze flickered to Harry, unmistakable disapproval in his expression. His Majesty's connection to the castle has proven valuable, Severus, Dumbledore replied mildly. The defenses are reacting to his presence in ways I had not anticipated. Snape's lips pressed into a thin line, but he offered no further objection. Professors Flitwick and Sprout joined them moments later, Flitwick looking excited despite the gravity of the situation, Sprout breathless and concerned. What exactly are we dealing with, Albus? Sprout asked. That remains to be seen, Dumbledore answered. Harry has detected something amiss within our security measures. As they made their way toward the third-floor corridor, Harry noticed the castle continuing to react to their passage. Torches flared brighter as he approached, then dimmed after he passed. Suits of armor turned their helmeted heads to track his movement. Portraits whispered among themselves, spreading word of the king's midnight expedition. The castle is fully awake now, Flitwick observed quietly, watching as a staircase shifted position to create a more direct path for their group. I haven't seen Hogwarts this responsive since, well, ever. They reached the forbidden corridor, which now seemed even darker and more forbidding than before. The oppressive silence had deepened, and Harry could feel a faint vibration through the soles of his shoes, as if the castle itself were trembling with unease. Dumbledore paused before the door, turning to address the group. Beyond this point lie our combined protections for the Philosopher's Stone. Each of you created one safeguard, as did I. If something has indeed breached these defenses, we must proceed with utmost caution. With a flick of his wand, Dumbledore conjured the same gentle music McGonagall had used earlier. The door swung open to reveal the massive Cerberus, its 3 heads already drooping as the lullaby took effect. Hagrid's contribution, McGonagall explained for Harry's benefit. He named it Fluffy, if you can believe it. Harry might have laughed under different circumstances. Now, however, his attention was fixed on the trapdoor beneath the creature's enormous paws. As they carefully maneuvered around the sleeping beast, his scar began to prickle again, the sensation growing stronger as they approached the entrance to the chambers below. "It's down there," Harry said quietly. "Something that shouldn't be in Hogwarts." Dumbledore studied him with those penetrating blue eyes. "Can you describe what you're sensing more precisely, Harry?" Harry frowned, trying to articulate the strange feeling. "It's like a wrongness. Something that doesn't belong. The castle is rejecting it, and..." He touched his scar, "This is reacting to it as well." A shadow of concern crossed Dumbledore's face. "Interesting. Your scar has always been a unique magical artifact, a result of surviving the killing curse. Its response to this situation may be significant." The headmaster opened the trapdoor, revealing a pitch-black drop below. "Devil's snare awaits at the bottom," he informed them. "Professor Sprout's contribution. I shall go first to ensure the way is clear." Dumbledore lowered himself through the opening and disappeared into the darkness. After a moment, his voice floated up, "All is well. You may follow, but be prepared to relax completely when you land." One by one, they dropped through the trapdoor, landing on the cushioning plant below. Harry felt tendrils beginning to curl around his limbs and forced himself to go limp, remembering from herbology that Devil's Snare retreated from those who didn't resist. Sure enough, he slipped through the plant and landed lightly on solid ground beside Dumbledore and McGonagall. Luminaris had bypassed the plant entirely, flaming directly into the chamber below. In the Phoenix's blue-gold light, Harry could see they stood in a stone passage that sloped downward. The air was cool and damp, with an earthy smell that reminded him of the dungeons, only deeper. "This way," Dumbledore directed, leading them down the passage. "Professor Flitwick's challenge is next." They entered a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceiling arching high above them. The air was filled with small, jewel-bright birds that darted and swooped overhead, except they weren't birds at all, but winged keys. On the opposite side stood a heavy wooden door with an ancient-looking lock. "We must catch the correct key," Flitwick explained, pointing to several broomsticks leaning against the wall. "Most ingenious, if I do say so myself." Dumbledore, however, simply raised his wand. "As the creator of this challenge, I have a master key, so to speak." With a complex pattern of movement, he summoned a large silver key with bright blue wings from the flock. The key struggled briefly before surrendering to his spell. "That's cheating," Harry heard Flitwick mutter good-naturedly. The next chamber contained McGonagall's challenge, a giant wizard's chess set that required players to take the place of pieces and win a game to cross. Again, Dumbledore bypassed the full challenge, using his authority as headmaster to command the pieces to part, creating a path across the board. "Apologies for the shortcuts, but time may be of the essence," Dumbledore explained as they hurried through. "If something has indeed breached our defenses, we must reach it quickly." The fourth chamber housed a mountain troll, mercifully unconscious, with a large bump on its head. "It appears someone has already passed this way," Snape observed, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. Harry's sense of wrongness intensified as they entered the fifth chamber. Flames immediately sprang up in the doorway behind them and in the doorway ahead, trapping them in the room. A table with 7 differently shaped bottles stood in the center, Snape's logic puzzle. "My contribution," the potions master confirmed, approaching the table. His eyes narrowed as he examined the bottles. "Someone has indeed tampered with this. The positioning is wrong." Before Snape could elaborate, Harry gasped, his hand flying to his forehead. The prickling in his scar had suddenly sharpened into genuine pain. At the same moment, Luminaris let out a warning trill, and the stone floor beneath them gave a violent shudder. "The castle is reacting," Flitwick squeaked, steadying himself against the wall as another tremor shook the chamber. "Severus, quickly," Dumbledore commanded, his usual calm demeanor giving way to urgent focus. Snape selected the smallest bottle from the table. This will allow one person to pass through the black flames ahead. There's barely enough for one swallow. I shall go, Dumbledore decided. The rest of you, no, Harry interrupted, stepping forward. It has to be me. The castle is trying to tell me something. Whatever's through there, Hogwarts wants me to face it. Absolutely not, McGonagall protested. You're a first-year student, regardless of your other titles. But Harry felt certainty growing within him, a conviction that transcended his own doubts and fears. The castle is responding to me as its heir. I need to see what's causing this reaction. Luminaris trilled in agreement, circling above Harry's head before landing on his shoulder. The phoenix's song seemed to strengthen Harry's resolve, filling him with courage he hadn't known he possessed. Dumbledore studied Harry intently, as if seeing him in a new light. The castle's magic is indeed manifesting through you, Harry. But the danger, I'll be right behind him, interrupted a new voice. Harry turned to see Hermione standing in the doorway they had entered from, Ron at her side. Both looked determined, if slightly out of breath. Miss Granger. Mr. Weasley. McGonagall exclaimed. You were instructed to remain in the headmaster's office. With respect, Professor, Hermione replied, her voice steady despite her evident nervousness, as members of His Majesty's Council, we couldn't let him face this alone. Council? Snape repeated with a sneer. A collection of first years is hardly a royal council. Actually, Ron countered, his ears reddening but his gaze direct. Historically, the Royal Council included representatives chosen for loyalty and specific skills rather than age or status. The Weasleys have been strategic advisors to the crown for generations. Harry felt a surge of gratitude toward his friends. Their presence bolstered his determination, reminding him that whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them in isolation. It seems His Majesty has indeed begun assembling his council, Dumbledore observed, a peculiar mixture of concern and approval in his expression. Nevertheless, I cannot allow students to place themselves in danger. As if in response to his words, the castle gave another violent shudder. Cracks appeared in the stone walls, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Luminaris launched from Harry's shoulder with an urgent cry. We're running out of time, Harry said. The castle is trying to purge whatever's down here. If we don't address it, these chambers might collapse entirely. Dumbledore and McGonagall exchanged looks, a silent communication passing between them. Finally, Dumbledore gave a reluctant nod. Very well, Harry. But I insist on accompanying you. Professor Snape's potion may only allow one to pass, but I suspect Hogwarts might make an exception for its heir and headmaster together. Snape looked like he wanted to object but instead handed the small bottle to Dumbledore. It would be foolhardy for anyone else to attempt passage, he said, his dark gaze lingering on Harry's friends. The rest should retreat to safety. We'll wait right here, Hermione insisted. Unless the castle starts to actually collapse, of course, she added hastily at McGonagall's stern look. Dumbledore took a small sip of the potion, then passed the bottle to Harry. A curious sensation, he remarked. Like ice flowing through one's veins. Harry drank the remaining drops, experiencing the same icy feeling. Luminaris flew ahead, passing effortlessly through the black flames. With the phoenix lighting their way, Harry and Dumbledore stepped through the fire together, unharmed. The chamber beyond was the largest yet, with a high domed ceiling and ornate pillars supporting stone arches. At its center stood the Mirror of Erist, the same mirror Harry had discovered during Christmas holidays, which showed the deepest desires of one's heart. And before the mirror, his back to them, stood a familiar figure in purple robes and turban. Professor Quirrell, Harry gasped. The defense against the dark arts teacher turned slowly, his usual nervous stammer nowhere in evidence as he spoke. I wondered if I'd be seeing you here, Potter. I confess I am both surprised and disappointed, Quirinus, Dumbledore said gravely. Though perhaps I should not be. There were signs, had I chosen to see them. Quirrell smiled, a cold expression utterly unlike his classroom persona. The great Albus Dumbledore, deceived by a stuttering fool. How long did you think your precious stone would remain safe, with that mirror as its final guardian? A clever idea, hiding it where only someone who wanted to find the stone, but not use it, could retrieve it. But you made one critical error. And what might that be? Dumbledore inquired, his tone conversational despite the tension radiating from him. You failed to account for a will stronger than my own. Quirrell's hands moved to his turban. He wished to speak with you directly, especially the boy king. Before Dumbledore could intervene, Quirrell began unwinding his turban. Harry's scar exploded with pain so intense he staggered, nearly falling to his knees. Luminaris screeched, the sound piercing through Harry's agony. The turban fell away, and Quirrell turned slowly. Where the back of his head should have been was a face, chalk white with glaring red eyes and slits for nostrils, like a snake. Harry Potter, it whispered, the boy who lived, and now, the boy who would be king. Voldemort, Harry breathed, understanding crashing over him like an icy wave. This was the wrongness the castle had been rejecting, not an object or a spell, but the fractured soul of the darkest wizard of the age, parasitically attached to Quirrell. Yes, the face hissed. You see what I have become? Mere shadow and vapor, forced to share another's body. But with the elixir of life from the Philosopher's Stone, I can create a body of my own. Then perhaps we shall discuss the future of your kingdom. Dumbledore moved with surprising speed for a man his age, positioning himself between Harry and Quirrell/Voldemort. You shall not touch him, Tom. Always the protector, Dumbledore, Voldemort's face sneered. But you cannot shield the boy forever. Especially now that magic itself has made him so interesting. Harry felt the castle responding to his fear and pain. The floor vibrated beneath his feet, and the ornate pillars began to crack, stone dust sifting down from above. Hogwarts was rejecting the invader within its walls with increasing violence. You cannot remain here, Tom, Dumbledore said calmly. The castle itself denies you entry. As heir to two founders and magical king, Harry's connection to Hogwarts is far stronger than any claim you might make through Slytherin's diluted bloodline. Voldemort's red eyes narrowed. Is that so? Then let us test the boy's connection. The face twisted in concentration, and suddenly Quirrell's body jerked backward, as if pulled by invisible strings. Get the stone. Voldemort commanded. Quirrell lurched toward the mirror, positioning himself before it. I see myself presenting the stone to my master, he muttered. But how do I retrieve it? Use the boy, Voldemort instructed. Bring him here. Quirrell spun and lunged for Harry, but Luminaris intercepted him, wings spread wide as the phoenix unleashed a burst of blinding light. Quirrell screamed, throwing up his hands to shield his face, giving Dumbledore the moment he needed to cast a powerful shield charm between Harry and danger. The castle's trembling intensified, chunks of ceiling now breaking loose and crashing to the floor. One of the ornate pillars cracked from top to bottom with a sound like thunder. Harry, Dumbledore called over the noise, the castle is responding to your distress. You must gain control of its reaction before the chamber collapses. Harry struggled to focus through the pain in his scar and the chaos around him. Remembering Flitwick's lessons, he closed his eyes briefly, seeking the connection he'd been learning to recognize, the magical link between himself and Hogwarts. It was there, vibrating with power and ancient magic, but wild and unstable in his fear. Steady, he thought, directing his will toward the castle's magic. Don't destroy. Protect. Contain. The violent shaking eased slightly, though the chamber still groaned with structural stress. Taking advantage of the momentary reprieve, Dumbledore engaged Quirrell in a dazzling display of magical combat, spells of colors Harry had never seen before slicing through the air, barriers forming and shattering, the very atmosphere crackling with power. But Voldemort's presence granted Quirrell unnatural resilience. Spells that should have incapacitated him merely staggered him briefly before he pressed forward again, driven by his master's implacable will. And Dumbledore, for all his legendary skill, seemed constrained by the unstable environment, careful not to trigger further collapse with more destructive magic. Luminaris circled above, occasionally diving to harry Quirrell with talons and wings, but even the phoenix seemed reluctant to use its full power within the failing chamber. The stalemate couldn't last, something had to give. In that moment of clarity, Harry understood what he needed to do. He was the focal point, the nexus where the castle's magic, Voldemort's presence, and the current crisis converged. Rather than fighting to control Hogwarts' reaction, he needed to channel it, direct it with purpose. Harry stepped forward, ignoring Dumbledore's warning cry. The pain in his scar was almost blinding now, but he pushed through it, focusing on the connection he felt to the stones beneath his feet, the magic saturating the air around him. "Hogwarts," he commanded, his voice steady with newfound authority, "reject the intruder." The effect was immediate and dramatic. The trembling floor beneath Quirrell's feet suddenly shifted, rippling like water before solidifying into a different configuration. The stone itself was responding to Harry's will, reshaping to separate Quirrell from the mirror of Erist. "What is this?" Quirrell gasped, struggling to maintain his balance. "The castle recognizes its true heir," Harry answered, surprised by the confidence in his own voice. "And you are not welcome here." Voldemort's face contorted with rage. "Kill him," he commanded Quirrell. "Kill him now." Quirrell lunged forward, hands outstretched toward Harry's throat. Dumbledore moved to intercept but was a fraction too slow. Quirrell's fingers were inches from Harry when Luminaris dove between them, a streak of blue-gold flame. Harry instinctively raised his own hands in defense. As his palms connected with Quirrell's skin, something extraordinary happened. Quirrell shrieked in agony, recoiling as if burned. Where Harry had touched him, the skin blistered and smoked. "What is this magic?" Quirrell cried, staring in horror at his damaged hands. "Master, I cannot touch him." "Then kill him with magic, fool," Voldemort commanded. But as Quirrell raised his wand, Harry acted on pure instinct. He lunged forward and pressed his hands to Quirrell's face. The effect was immediate, Quirrell's skin cracked and blistered beneath Harry's touch, his screams echoing through the chamber. The protection that had saved Harry as a baby was still at work, Lily Potter's sacrificial magic making Quirrell's body uninhabitable for Voldemort's fractured soul. As Quirrell collapsed, a dark mist rose from his body, Voldemort's essence, fleeing its dying host. The mist formed a screaming face for one terrible moment before surging toward Harry. Dumbledore stepped between them, his wand describing complex patterns that created a barrier of golden light. The dark mist hit the barrier and recoiled, then fled upward, passing through the ceiling and away from Hogwarts entirely. As Voldemort's presence departed, the castle's violent trembling subsided. The chamber still showed signs of structural damage, cracked pillars, fallen stones, but the immediate danger of collapse had passed. Harry stood shakily, his hands still tingling from whatever power had flowed through them. "That," Dumbledore said quietly, "was remarkably well done, Harry." Before Harry could respond, the chamber door burst open. Professors McGonagall, Snape, Flitwick, and Sprout rushed in, followed closely by Ron and Hermione, all with wands drawn. "The flames vanished," McGonagall explained, taking in the scene with wide eyes, Quirrell's crumpled form, the damaged chamber, Harry standing unsteadily with Luminaris perched protectively on his shoulder. "Is that," Sprout began, staring at Quirrell's body. "Professor Quirrell was hosting a most unwelcome guest," Dumbledore confirmed grimly. "Lord Voldemort has been attempting to steal the Philosopher's Stone." Gasps and exclamations filled the chamber. Snape's already pale face went nearly translucent, his dark eyes fixed on Harry with an indecipherable expression. "The stone," McGonagall remembered suddenly. "Is it safe?" "It remains within the mirror," Dumbledore assured her, "though I believe it would be wise to return it to Nicholas without delay. Recent events suggest Hogwarts is not as secure as we had believed." Ron and Hermione had rushed to Harry's side, supporting him as the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, leaving him lightheaded and drained. "You all right, mate?" Ron asked anxiously. That was incredibly dangerous, Hermione added, though her tone conveyed more concern than criticism. But also rather brilliant. Harry managed a weak smile. Thanks for coming after me. Both of you. That's what a council does, isn't it? Ron said. Stands with their king, even when he's being a reckless prat. Despite everything, Harry laughed. Leave it to Ron to cut through the tension with blunt honesty. The sound seemed to lighten the atmosphere in the damaged chamber, a reminder that despite the gravity of what had occurred, they were still children who had survived a frightening ordeal. I believe, Dumbledore announced, his blue eyes twinkling as he observed the three friends, that a visit to the hospital wing is in order. After which, we have much to discuss about tonight's events. As they made their way back through the chambers, Harry felt the castle's magic flowing around him, no longer chaotic but supportive, like a sentient presence acknowledging what he had accomplished. The stone passages seemed to widen as they passed, torches flaring brighter to light their way, the entire structure humming with a kind of satisfied resonance. Hogwarts had faced its first test since recognizing its heir, and together, they had prevailed. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Harry knew the castle would stand with him, not just as a school or a building, but as a conscious ally in the battles to come. The hospital wing was quiet save for the soft clicking of Madame Pomfrey's heels as she bustled about, muttering disapprovingly about dangerous adventures and reckless children while administering various potions. Harry lay in a bed near the window, where Luminaris perched on the sill, occasionally trilling soft, healing notes that seemed to ease the lingering pain in Harry's scar. Ron and Hermione sat beside his bed, having refused to leave despite Madame Pomfrey's insistence that they return to their dormitories. Dumbledore had intervened on their behalf, explaining that royal council members traditionally attend their monarch during recovery from magical confrontations. I can't believe you know who was literally in our defense classroom all year, Ron said for perhaps the 5th time. Right behind Quirrell's head, listening to us practice counterjinxes. It explains the headaches I kept getting in that class, Harry noted. My scar was reacting to his presence. Hermione's expression was thoughtful. The way the castle responded to you was extraordinary, Harry. It's like Hogwarts recognized Voldemort as a threat to you personally, not just to the school. The founders built Hogwarts to protect magical children, came Dumbledore's voice as he entered the hospital wing. That purpose remains embedded in its very stones, enhanced by its connection to Harry as both heir and king. The headmaster approached Harry's bed, conjuring a comfortable armchair for himself. His expression was somber despite the characteristic twinkle in his eyes. I owe you an apology, Harry, he said quietly. I had suspected something amiss with Professor Quirrell but failed to investigate thoroughly enough. My efforts to protect the stone inadvertently placed you in danger. You couldn't have known Voldemort was literally attached to him, Harry pointed out. Perhaps not the specific nature of the possession, but I sense dark magic at work. Dumbledore sighed. In my defense, I believed the stone was secure and that Voldemort, in his weakened state, posed minimal immediate threat within Hogwarts walls. I underestimated both his desperation and the castle's response to your presence. What happens now? Hermione asked. With the stone, I mean. Nicholas and I have agreed it should be destroyed, Dumbledore revealed. Voldemort's attempt to steal it demonstrates the risk is too great. Nicholas and Perenelle have enough elixir stored to set their affairs in order before they move on. They're choosing to die? Ron asked, looking shocked. After 600 years of life, they view it as the next great adventure, Dumbledore explained. A perspective that comes, perhaps, with considerable age. Harry found his thoughts drifting to the Peverell family magic he had inherited, the power over death that Ragnarok had mentioned. Could his ancestral magic have offered the Flammels another option? It was something to explore when he had access to the Peverell grimoires again. There is another matter we must discuss, Dumbledore continued, his tone becoming more serious. Voldemort's interest in your newfound status, Harry. He seemed particularly concerned about your coronation. He said I was interesting now, Harry recalled with a shudder. More so than just being the boy who lived. Indeed. The magical monarchy represents power beyond what the ministry controls, power that exists outside the political structure Voldemort previously sought to corrupt. Your coronation changed the landscape he expected to return to. This perspective hadn't occurred to Harry before. He had been so focused on adapting to his unexpected role that he hadn't considered how it might alter Voldemort's long-term strategies. "Does that make me more of a target?" he asked. "Potentially," Dumbledore acknowledged. "Though it also grants you protections and allies he cannot easily circumvent. The Goblin Nation's allegiance alone significantly complicates any financial or political maneuvering on his part." "And the castle," Hermione added. "Hogwarts clearly recognizes Harry as its rightful heir and protects him accordingly." Dumbledore nodded. "Which brings us to the summer holiday. We must arrange appropriate accommodations that balance security with your need to continue learning about your royal responsibilities." "I am not returning to the Dursleys," Harry said firmly, the authority of his position evident in his tone despite his hospital pajamas and rumpled hair. "No, I believe that arrangement has indeed reached its conclusion," Dumbledore agreed, surprising Harry with his easy capitulation. "Avalon Castle would be the most appropriate residence, given its historical significance and magical protections. However, I would suggest a compromise." "What kind of compromise?" Harry asked warily. "Avalon should be your primary residence, certainly. But perhaps you might consider dividing your time between there and another location, one where you can interact with a wizarding family and experience a more normal childhood alongside your royal duties." Ron perked up. "You could stay with us at the Burrow for part of the summer. Mom would be thrilled, and Dad's been dying to talk to you about some of the old Weasley Crown connections he's been researching." "A splendid suggestion," Dumbledore approved. "The Weasley family's historical ties to the Crown make them ideal hosts. And I believe certain additional protections could be established at the Burrow without much difficulty." The conversation was interrupted by the hospital wing doors swinging open to admit Professor McGonagall, accompanied by a severe-looking which Harry didn't recognize and, to his surprise, Neville Longbottom. "Your Majesty," McGonagall began formally, "Lady Augusta Longbottom has arrived at Hogwarts and requested an immediate audience. Given the circumstances, I took the liberty of bringing her directly here." The elderly witch stepped forward, her expression stern but not unkind. She wore formal robes of deep green and a hat adorned with what appeared to be a stuffed vulture. Despite her eccentric appearance, she carried herself with unmistakable dignity. "Your Majesty," she said, executing a precise curtsy despite her age. "I apologize for the intrusion, but when news reached me of tonight's events, I felt it imperative to fulfill my family's obligation without delay." "Grandmother says our family has a magical duty to the Crown," Neville explained, looking both nervous and oddly determined. "Something that activated when you were crowned." Augusta Longbottom nodded approvingly at her grandson. "The Longbottoms have served as protectors of the magical monarch for 17 generations. When the crown disappeared, that duty became dormant, but it has awakened with your coronation." She withdrew a small box from her robes and opened it to reveal a medallion of gold and silver, bearing a crest Harry didn't recognize, a shield displaying a bear rampant with stars surrounding it. "This is the badge of the Royal Guard," Lady Longbottom explained. "Traditionally worn by the head of the Longbottom family while serving as captain of the Royal Guard. It has remained in our family's vault for 1,000 years, awaiting the crown's return." Harry looked from Augusta to Neville, understanding dawning. "You're offering to re-establish the Royal Guard?" "It is not an offer but a duty," Augusta corrected, though her tone remained respectful. "The magic binding our family to the crown has reawakened. The Longbottoms stand ready to serve, as we always have." She presented the box to Harry with a formal bow. "Traditionally, your Majesty would bestow this upon the current head of House Longbottom, who would then assemble a guard worthy of the crown's protection." Harry took the box, feeling the weight of another tradition, another responsibility settling upon him. But as his fingers touched the medallion, he felt a surge of magic, similar to when he'd claimed his heir rings, but different. This was not claiming something for himself but recognizing a bond between houses, a covenant of protection and service that had endured a millennium of dormancy. His gaze shifted to Neville, who stood straighter than Harry had ever seen him, a quiet determination in his usually timid expression. In that moment, Harry knew exactly what he needed to do. "Lady Augusta," he said formally, rising from his hospital bed despite Madame Pomfrey's distant sound of protest, "I recognize and honor House Longbottom's traditional role. However, I believe the time has come for the next generation to step forward." He turned to Neville, holding out the medallion. "Neville Longbottom, I name you my personal guard and protector, and charge you with the eventual re-establishment of the Royal Guard when the time is right." Gasps filled the hospital wing. Augusta Longbottom's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in consideration. Neville himself looked thunderstruck. "Me?" he stammered. "But I'm not. I can't." "You stood with me tonight," Harry said quietly. "When you heard I was in danger, you didn't hesitate to come looking for me, even knowing we might face Voldemort himself." He ignored the collective flinch at the name. "That's the kind of courage I need in those closest to me." Dumbledore's eyes twinkled with approval. "A most wise decision, Your Majesty. Traditions must sometimes adapt to new circumstances." Augusta studied her grandson with new eyes. "The boy has his father's heart," she acknowledged after a moment. "Perhaps it is indeed time for the next generation to take up the mantle." She nodded to Harry. "House Longbottom accepts your decision, Your Majesty." With trembling hands, Neville accepted the medallion. As his fingers closed around it, a soft golden light emanated from the metal, enveloping him briefly before fading. Neville straightened, his expression changing subtly, still recognizably himself, but with a new confidence in his bearing. "I swear to protect you," he said to Harry, his voice steady and clear. "With my magic and my life if necessary." The formal words seemed to come to him instinctively, perhaps guided by the family magic now flowing through him. Harry felt the magic of the oath settle between them, another strand in the web of ancient connections being rewoven around the restored crown. "Well," Madame Pomfrey announced, breaking the solemn moment, "if you're well enough to be appointing royal guards, Your Majesty, I suppose you're well enough to receive your other visitors. They've been most insistent." The doors to the hospital wing opened again to reveal a most unexpected delegation, the Hogwarts house elves, dozens of them, led by a particularly ancient elf whose tea-towel toga bore the Hogwarts crest in elaborate embroidery. "Your Majesty," the ancient elf said, bowing so low his long nose touched the floor. "I is being haughty, head elf of Hogwarts Castle. We is coming to pledge ourselves to the heir of the founders and the magical king." Harry glanced at Dumbledore, who looked as surprised as everyone else. "I didn't know Hogwarts had a head elf," the headmaster admitted. "Haughty's position is only being active when the heir is present," the elf explained. "For 1,000 years, we elves is keeping the old ways, waiting for the heir to return." "The old ways?" Harry asked. "Before wizard councils, before ministers," Haughty elaborated, "elves was being royal messengers and caretakers of the magical places. We was having honor and purpose beyond cooking and cleaning." The revelation struck Harry deeply. Like the goblins, the house elves had maintained traditions and memories of a time when magical governance was structured differently, when they had possessed roles beyond mere servitude. "The castle tells us you is fighting the Dark One tonight," Haughty continued. "Hogwarts elves wish to serve the true heir, as we was always meant to do." Harry thought quickly. The elves' offer represented both an opportunity and a responsibility. House elves were powerful magical beings in their own right, despite wizarding society's tendency to overlook or diminish them. Their loyalty could be invaluable, but Harry was uncomfortable with the concept of ownership or servitude. "I would be honored to have the help of the Hogwarts elves," Harry said carefully, "as allies rather than servants." "In the old ways you speak of, what exactly were the elves' roles?" Haughty's enormous eyes widened further. "We was being royal messengers, carrying words that couldn't be intercepted. We was maintaining the ancient places where magic is strongest. We was creating and maintaining the hidden ways between important magical locations. Pride suffused the old elf's voice. And we was protecting magical children, especially those born to non-magical families, who had no protection until they came to Hogwarts. This last role captured Harry's attention immediately. You protected Muggle-born children? When they showed first magic, before they knew what they was being, elves would watch over them, Haughty confirmed. Preventing accidents, keeping dark creatures away, helping control wild magic until proper training could begin. Hermione looked fascinated. That's why accidental magic rarely causes serious harm, even before children come to Hogwarts. I always wondered about that statistical anomaly. Would you be willing to resume these traditional roles? Harry asked Haughty. Especially the protection of magical children born to Muggle families? Haughty's wrinkled face broke into a wide smile. Hogwarts elves would be honored, Your Majesty. This is being our true purpose. Then I gratefully accept your allegiance, Harry said formally. Not as servants but as valued allies in protecting magical Britain, especially its children. The assembled elves broke into cheers, their high voices echoing through the hospital wing. Several began happy dances, while others wiped tears from their enormous eyes. A most interesting development, Dumbledore murmured, watching the celebration with thoughtful eyes. The house elves have always maintained their own magical traditions, largely invisible to wizarding society. Their allegiance represents a significant shift in magical alliances. As the evening progressed, more visitors arrived, Professor Flitwick to discuss expanding Harry's magical control lessons over the summer, Hagrid to tearfully apologize for his inadvertent role in the Philosopher's Stone debacle, and finally, just before curfew, Draco Malfoy, who slipped in quietly while Madame Pomfrey was distracted. My father received word about tonight's events, Malfoy said without preamble, his voice low to avoid being overheard. The Dark Lord's appearance has complicated things for certain families. Complicated how? Harry asked, noting the strain in Malfoy's normally composed expression. Old allegiances are being tested against new ones, Malfoy explained cryptically. The magical oath binding my family to the crown conflicts directly with other commitments some may have made. Harry understood what Malfoy couldn't say explicitly. Families like his, who had served Voldemort, were now caught between that dark allegiance and their ancient oaths to the crown. The magical binding of these contradictory loyalties must be creating significant pressure. Your family chose the crown tonight, Harry observed. By warning me. Malfoy inclined his head slightly. The Malfoys are ultimately pragmatists, as I told you before. And family magic is persuasive. Tell your father I appreciate the intelligence, Harry said. And that the crown recognizes loyalty, especially when it comes at personal risk. A flicker of relief crossed Malfoy's face. I'll convey your message. He glanced around at the unlikely gathering in the hospital wing, Gryffindors, house elves, and the formidable Augusta Longbottom still deep in conversation with Professor McGonagall. You're building quite the coalition, Potter. Unexpected allies from every corner. That's rather the point, isn't it? Harry replied. Breaking down the old divisions. Malfoy's expression turned contemplative. Perhaps. Though some traditions have value worth preserving. With a formal nod, he slipped out as quietly as he had arrived. By the time Madame Pomfrey finally insisted on clearing the hospital wing, Harry's head was spinning with the implications of everything that had transpired. In the span of a single night, he had faced Voldemort, deepened his connection with Hogwarts, appointed the first member of a new royal guard, and gained the allegiance of the house elves. As he drifted toward sleep, Luminaris singing softly from his perch by the window, Harry reflected that his life had become extraordinarily complex in the few months since his coronation. Yet despite the dangers and responsibilities, he wouldn't trade it for the anonymity he'd once craved. For the first time in his life, he felt he truly belonged somewhere, at the center of a web of connections, loyalties, and traditions that stretched back through centuries of magical history. Whatever challenges tomorrow brought, he would face them not alone, but supported by friends, allies, and the ancient magic that had chosen him to wear a crown no one had seen for 1,000 years. The final weeks of term passed in a whirlwind of activity. News of the confrontation beneath the third-floor corridor spread throughout the school despite attempts to keep the details confidential. By breakfast the next morning, the entire student body seemed aware that King Harry had faced Professor Quirrell, who had been secretly hosting you-know-who, and had emerged victorious. The story grew more elaborate with each retelling. By dinner, according to some first years, Harry had battled 100 inferi while simultaneously dueling Voldemort and preventing Hogwarts from collapsing into the Black Lake. Harry made a token effort to correct the wildest rumors but soon gave up. The truth was extraordinary enough without embellishment. More significant than the rumors were the practical changes that followed that night. Neville, wearing the Longbottom medallion beneath his robes, took his new role as Harry's protector with surprising seriousness. He began rising early to practice defensive spells, sought advice from Professor Flitwick on dueling techniques, and even approached the Weasley twins about creating magical devices that could detect potential threats. The house elves, true to their word, established a rotating watch around Harry, invisible but present. Occasionally he would glimpse one out of the corner of his eye, or notice small helpful magics occurring around him, his shoelaces tying themselves, doors opening just before he reached them, his favorite foods appearing regardless of what was served at the Gryffindor table. Perhaps most surprising was the subtle shift in the dynamics with the Slytherin students. While open hostility remained the public norm, Harry noticed several of the older Slytherins watching him with speculative rather than antagonistic gazes. Draco maintained their arrangement of public rivalry and private communication, passing along information about shifting allegiances within traditionally dark-aligned families. The Greengrass and Davis families have formally acknowledged the Crown's authority, he reported during one clandestine meeting. They were neutral during the last war and see the restoration of the monarchy as an opportunity to gain influence outside the Death Eater-dominated power structure. What about the families that weren't neutral? Harry asked. Malfoy's expression tightened. More complicated. The family magic compelling loyalty to the Crown conflicts directly with the Dark Mark's binding. It's causing physical distress for those caught between obligations. Physical distress. My father hasn't slept properly in weeks, Malfoy admitted, a rare glimpse of vulnerability breaking through his composed facade. The contradicting magical oaths are literally tearing at his magic. Eventually, he'll have to choose definitively or risk losing his magic entirely. Harry hadn't anticipated this consequence of his coronation, that the ancient family oaths to the Crown would create magical conflict for those who had later pledged themselves to Voldemort. It represented both a challenge and an opportunity. Some, like Lucius Malfoy, might be driven to renounce Voldemort not from moral conviction but from magical necessity. The Crown acknowledges those who return to their original oaths of fealty, Harry said carefully. Though full trust must be earned through actions, not merely claimed by magical compulsion. Malfoy seemed to understand the diplomatic phrasing. I'll convey your message. It may ease certain decisions. Beyond Hogwarts, larger political ripples continued to spread from Harry's confrontation with Voldemort. Minister Fudge arrived the following day, accompanied by Percy Weasley's boss, Bartemius Crouch, and, to Harry's surprise, Ragnarok from Gringotts. The meeting took place in Dumbledore's office, with Harry insisting on Ron and Hermione's presence as his council members. The adults seemed discomfited by the presence of first years in such a high-level discussion, but Harry held firm. Minister, Harry greeted Fudge with careful formality. What brings you to Hogwarts? Fudge fidgeted with his lime-green bowler hat. Disturbing reports, Your Majesty. Very disturbing indeed. Is it true that you know who was here? Actually here, within Hogwarts. He was possessing Professor Quirrell, Harry confirmed. He's been teaching defense against the dark arts all year. The color drained from Fudge's face. Impossible, he whispered. He's dead. Has been for a decade. I'm afraid not, Cornelius, Dumbledore said gravely. As I've suggested previously, Voldemort was defeated but not destroyed that night in Godric's Hollow. He has existed these 10 years as less than a spirit but more than a ghost, and now he has fled Hogwarts to recover his strength elsewhere. This can't get out, Fudge muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The panic, the international implications, no, it simply won't do. Harry exchanged glances with Ron and Hermione. The minister's primary concern appeared to be public relations rather than public safety. With respect, Minister, Harry said, choosing his words carefully, the wizarding public deserves to know that Voldemort, Fudge flinched violently at the name, hasn't been fully defeated. People need to be vigilant and prepared. Prepared for what? Fudge demanded. Mass hysteria. Economic collapse. The international community questioning our ability to govern ourselves. He shook his head firmly. No, this information must be contained. That may prove difficult, Crouch interjected, speaking for the first time. His precise diction and stiff demeanor reminded Harry of Percy. Rumors are already circulating through the ministry. Containing this entirely may be impossible. Then we control the narrative, Fudge insisted. A rogue wizard impersonating Quirrell, nothing to do with you-know-who. An isolated incident, swiftly handled by Dumbledore and His Majesty. He glanced at Harry. That should satisfy public concern while avoiding panic. Harry felt a surge of frustration. Minister, denying Voldemort's return won't make it any less real. It only leaves people unprepared when he makes his next move. There won't be a next move, Fudge blustered. Not if the ministry increases security appropriately. Which brings me to our second purpose here today. He gestured to Crouch. Barty, explain the protection protocols we're proposing. Crouch produced a scroll from his robes. In light of recent events, the ministry believes enhanced security for His Majesty is paramount. We propose assigning a rotation of Aurors to serve as royal guards, reporting directly to the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. A ministry-controlled guard, Ron murmured quietly to Harry. Convenient for them. Harry nodded slightly, understanding the political maneuvering at work. Thank you for your concern, Mr. Crouch, he said politely, but I've already begun re-establishing the traditional royal guard under Neville Longbottom, whose family has historically held that responsibility. Longbottom? Crouch repeated incredulously. The boy is 11 years old. As am I, Harry pointed out mildly. Yet magic saw fit to make me king. He turned to Ragnarok, who had remained silent throughout the exchange. Director Ragnarok, I assume your presence relates to security arrangements as well. The goblin's sharp teeth gleamed in what might have been a smile. Indeed, Your Majesty. Gringotts has completed the additional protective enchantments at Avalon Castle, as requested. The property is now under the highest level of security protocols, equivalent to our deepest vaults. Excellent, Harry approved. And the other matter we discussed? The royal treasury is fully operational, Ragnarok confirmed. And the first distribution to St. Mungo's Hospital has been completed, as per your instructions. Fudge looked startled. Distribution? What distribution? A royal grant to expand St. Mungo's research department, Harry explained. Focusing particularly on long-term spell damage and treatments for werewolf affliction. But such financial decisions should be coordinated with the ministry, Fudge protested. There are protocols, procedures, the royal treasury operates independently of ministry oversight, Ragnarok interrupted smoothly. This was established in the Treaty of 986, which has never been rescinded. His Majesty has full discretion over royal funds. Fudge's face reddened. Now see here, the treaty is quite clear, Hermione interjected, earning a glare from the minister. She held up a leather-bound book. I've been researching historical governance structures as part of my council duties. The separation of royal finances from ministerial control was explicitly maintained even after the formation of the Ministry of Magic in 1707. Miss Granger has become quite the expert on magical constitutional law, Dumbledore observed, his eyes twinkling with amusement. The meeting continued in this vein for another hour, the ministry attempting to assert control over various aspects of Harry's role, Harry and his allies politely but firmly maintaining the crown's independence. By the end, Fudge looked like he'd swallowed something sour, while Crouch maintained his stiff professionalism despite clear frustration. Only Ragnarok seemed pleased with the outcome, executing a formal bow to Harry as the meeting concluded. "The Goblin Nation is honored by your continued trust, Your Majesty. Should you require anything further before your return to Avalon for the summer, you need only ask." "Actually," Harry said, "there is one more thing. Could Gringotts arrange secure transportation for my friends to visit Avalon during the holiday? Ron, Hermione, and Neville should see the royal residence, especially if they're to continue as my counsel." Of course, Ragnarok agreed. Royal portkeys can be created that will transport them directly through Avalon's wards. I shall have them prepared before term ends. As the adults departed, Hermione turned to Harry with an impressed expression. "You handled that brilliantly, Harry. The minister was trying to undermine your authority at every turn, but you didn't give an inch." "It helped having you there with all that historical research," Harry replied. "And Ron spotting the political angles." "We make a good team," Ron observed. "Each bringing different strengths. That's what a proper council should be, I reckon." Harry agreed wholeheartedly. Though he still felt overwhelmed by his responsibilities at times, having friends who complemented his abilities and filled knowledge gaps made the burden considerably lighter. The remainder of term passed quickly. Exams came and went, with Harry performing better than he'd expected given the year's tumultuous events. Hermione, predictably, achieved the highest marks in their year, while Ron managed respectable results despite minimal studying. Even Neville showed improvement, particularly in herbology where he outscored everyone except Hermione. The end-of-year feast brought another surprise. When Harry and his friends entered the Great Hall, they found it decorated not in any single house's colors but in a harmonious blend of all four, similar to the design in the Founder's Wing. The Hogwarts crest above the high table had been modified slightly to include a small crown above the H, acknowledging the heir's presence. Dumbledore rose as the students settled into their seats. "Another year gone," he announced cheerfully. "And what a year it has been. I trust your heads are all a little fuller than they were. And now have the summer ahead to get them nice and empty again before next year starts." Appreciative laughter rippled through the hall. "Now, as I understand it, the House Cup needs awarding," Dumbledore continued. "The points stand thus: in fourth place, Gryffindor with 312 points, in third, Hufflepuff with 352, Ravenclaw has 426, and Slytherin, 472. A storm of cheering and stamping broke out from the Slytherin table. Harry could see Draco Malfoy banging his goblet on the table, maintaining his public persona of anti-Gryffindor sentiment. Yes, well done, Slytherin," Dumbledore acknowledged. "However, recent events must be taken into account." The room went very still. "I have a few last-minute points to award," Dumbledore announced. First, to Mr. Ronald Weasley, for the best-played game of Wizard's chess Hogwarts has seen in many years, and for strategic counsel in a time of crisis, I award Gryffindor 50 points. Ron went purple in the face as Gryffindor erupted in cheers. Second, to Miss Hermione Granger, for the cool use of logic in the face of danger, exceptional research skills, and unwavering loyalty, I award Gryffindor 50 points. Hermione buried her face in her arms, overcome with emotion as the Gryffindor table's cheers grew louder. Third, to Mr. Neville Longbottom, for pure courage in accepting a sacred duty, and for standing by his friends when they needed him most, I award Gryffindor 50 points. The uproar was deafening. Neville, white with shock, disappeared under a pile of people hugging him. He had never won so many points for Gryffindor before. Fourth, to His Majesty, King Harry Potter, Dumbledore continued when the noise had died down, for pure nerve, outstanding courage, and exceptional leadership in the face of extraordinary circumstances, I award Gryffindor 60 points. The din was so loud it made the enchanted ceiling vibrate. Those who could add up while yelling themselves hoarse knew that Gryffindor now had exactly the same number of points as Slytherin. They had tied for the House Cup, if only Dumbledore had given Harry just one more point. Dumbledore raised his hand, and the room gradually fell silent. There is a tendency, he said, to view our differences as divisions. House rivalries, while spirited and traditional, sometimes lead us to forget that Hogwarts is greater than the sum of its parts. He gestured to the blended decorations around the hall. This year has reminded us that we are one school, united by our shared magical heritage. In that spirit, for the first time in Hogwarts history, the House Cup shall be shared equally between tied houses. With a wave of his hand, the decorations shifted slightly, still maintaining the harmonious blend of all four houses, but with Gryffindor and Slytherin colors slightly more prominent. The Gryffindor table exploded with cheers, while the Slytherin reaction was mixed, some looking outraged at having to share, others seeming thoughtful about the headmaster's words. A shared victory, Hermione noted approvingly. It's symbolic of the unity the magical world needs right now. Harry nodded, finding a certain symmetry in the outcome. As heir to both Gryffindor and Slytherin, he embodied the potential for reconciliation between the traditionally opposed houses. Perhaps Dumbledore's decision was a subtle acknowledgement of that fact. The feast that followed was among the best Harry had experienced at Hogwarts. As he looked around at his fellow students, not just his Gryffindor friends but those from other houses who now regarded him with various mixtures of respect, curiosity, and in some cases, tentative acceptance, he felt a sense of accomplishment that transcended house points or cups. In the span of a year, he had gone from an unwanted, unloved boy in a cupboard to a wizard, a student, a king, and perhaps most importantly, someone with genuine friends and a place where he belonged. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Voldemort's eventual return, political maneuvering from the ministry, or the ongoing process of re-establishing royal governance, he would face them from a position of strength, supported by allies both ancient and new. The journey back to London on the Hogwarts Express had a bittersweet quality. While Harry looked forward to a summer free from the Dursleys, exploring Avalon and learning more about his royal responsibilities, he would miss the daily routine of Hogwarts and the constant presence of his friends. "You have to write," Hermione insisted as they claimed a compartment together. "Both of you. I want to know everything that happens at Avalon, and I'll be researching more about magical governance over the summer." "We've got the royal portkeys Ragnarok provided," Ron reminded her, patting his pocket where the small, crown-shaped token rested. "We can visit whenever Harry gives the word." "I'm thinking weekly council meetings," Harry suggested. "And you're all welcome to stay at Avalon for longer visits too. There's more than enough room." Neville, who had joined their compartment along with the Longbottom medallion that rarely left his person now, looked both excited and nervous at the prospect. "Gran says she wants to review the old Royal Guard protocols with me before I spend too much time at Avalon. Apparently there are traditional training methods for Longbottom guards that haven't been used in centuries." "Sounds intense," Ron commented. "A bit," Neville admitted. "But honestly, I'm looking forward to it. It's the first time Gran seemed properly proud of me." Their conversation was interrupted by the compartment door sliding open to reveal Draco Malfoy, flanked as usual by Crabbe and Goyle. Unlike their previous encounters, however, Malfoy's expression lacked its typical sneer. "Potter," he greeted neutrally. "A word before we arrive in London?" Harry glanced at his friends, then nodded. "Sure." Rather than dismissing his companions, Harry followed Malfoy into the corridor, leaving the compartment door ajar so Ron, Hermione, and Neville could intervene if necessary, not that he expected trouble at this point, but Neville took his protective role very seriously. "My father asked me to convey a message," Malfoy said without preamble, his voice low enough that only Harry could hear. "He has made his choice regarding the conflicting obligations we discussed." Harry raised an eyebrow, waiting for Malfoy to continue. "He has decided that the Malfoy family's ancient oath to the crown supersedes later associations." Malfoy's careful phrasing made his meaning clear. Lucius had chosen the binding magic of fealty to the king over his loyalty to Voldemort. He wishes to formalize this decision over the summer, if you're amenable. I would be willing to receive him at Avalon, Harry replied carefully. Though I hope he understands that words and oaths must be followed by actions that demonstrate genuine loyalty. Malfoy nodded. He anticipated that condition. He's prepared to provide certain information as evidence of good faith. The blonde boy hesitated, then added, this decision wasn't easy for him. The magical conflict was becoming unbearable, but beyond that, it represents a significant shift in our family's position. Harry recognized the unspoken complexity in Malfoy's statement. Lucius wasn't simply switching allegiances for convenience, he was fundamentally reorienting his family's political and social standing in the wizarding world. The repercussions would be far-reaching, affecting everything from business relationships to personal friendships within pure-blood society. The Crown acknowledges the significance of your father's choice, Harry said formally. Have him contact Gringotts to arrange a meeting at Avalon after I've settled in. Relief flickered briefly across Malfoy's face before his composed mask returned. I'll inform him. He glanced back at Crabbe and Goyle, who were watching their interaction with confusion. For appearance's sake, I should probably say something insulting now. Harry suppressed a smile. Probably. Malfoy raised his voice to a carrying sneer. Just remember your place when we return next term, Potter. Royal or not, you're still a half-blood pretender. With a barely perceptible wink, Malfoy turned and stalked away, his bookends following in his wake. Ron's indignant face appeared at the compartment door. What did that git want? He demanded as Harry returned to his seat. Politics, Harry replied cryptically. Malfoy family business with the Crown. Ron looked skeptical but didn't press further. The remainder of the journey passed pleasantly, filled with plans for the summer, speculation about their second year at Hogwarts, and increasingly outlandish wizards' chess matches between Ron and Harry on Ron's ancient royal set, which had become almost preternaturally responsive to Harry's presence. As the train pulled into King's Cross Station, Harry felt a curious mixture of emotions. Unlike his fellow students, he wasn't returning to a family home but to a magical castle that had emerged from centuries of concealment specifically for him. Avalon wasn't just a residence, it was a symbol of his position and responsibilities, a physical manifestation of the change in his life. They gathered their belongings and disembarked onto the platform, where the usual crowd of waiting families created a bustling chaos of reunions. Harry spotted the Weasleys immediately, a flame-haired cluster surrounding Mrs. Weasley's plump, welcoming figure. Nearby stood Hermione's parents, looking slightly overwhelmed by the magical surroundings but beaming with pride as they spotted their daughter. Augusta Longbottom's vulture-topped hat was visible above the crowd, her stern posture unmistakable even at a distance. There's my ride, Harry said, nodding toward the far end of the platform where Ragnarok stood with two goblin guards, their formal attire drawing curious stares from passing wizards. Ron clapped him on the shoulder. Send word when you're settled at Avalon. Dad's already planning what to show you when you visit the Burrow. He's got boxes of old family records about Weasley battle mages in the royal service. I'll write as soon as I've organized my library, Hermione promised. There must be dozens of reference books that would be useful for our council meetings. Neville adjusted his medallion beneath his shirt. Gran wants to arrange a formal presentation of the Longbottom Guard Oath at Avalon. Is next week too soon? Harry smiled at his friends, his council, his supporters, the people who had stood by him through an extraordinary year of discovery and danger. Next week is perfect. All of you should come to Avalon then, we can make it the first official council meeting of the summer. With final hugs and promises to write, Harry made his way through the crowd toward Ragnarok. He was acutely aware of the stares and whispers that followed him, the parents pointing him out to their children, the respectful nods from older wizards and witches who recognized not just the famous boy who lived but the newly crowned magical king. Your Majesty, Ragnarok greeted him with a formal bow. Welcome back. Avalon awaits its master's return. Thank you, Director Ragnarok, Harry replied. I'm looking forward to seeing it again. As they moved toward a private apparition point, Harry glanced back at platform 934, at the scarlet steam engine that had carried him to Hogwarts and back, at the students and families going about their normal lives, at the magical world that was both his responsibility and his home. A year ago, he had been nobody, unwanted, unloved, unaware of his heritage or potential. Now he stood at the threshold of a summer that promised further discovery, deeper understanding of his role, and the continued development of his unique magic. He was Harry Potter, boy who lived, Hogwarts student, heir to founders, and magical king. Whatever challenges lay ahead, political maneuvering from the ministry, the lingering threat of Voldemort's return, or the ongoing process of re-establishing ancient magical traditions, he would face them not as the lonely boy from the cupboard under the stairs, but as a king with loyal friends, powerful allies, and a growing confidence in his ability to lead the magical world toward a brighter future. Luminaris appeared overhead in a flash of flame, circling once before landing on Harry's shoulder with a triumphant trill. The royal phoenix's presence drew gasps of admiration from nearby wizards and witches, a visible reminder of Harry's unique status. "Ready to go home, Your Majesty?" Ragnarok asked. Harry smiled, feeling the weight of his heir rings on his fingers and the warm presence of Luminaris on his shoulder. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm ready." With a final look at the platform where his journey had begun, and would continue when September brought him back to Hogwarts, Harry stepped forward into his future, not just as a student or a wizard, but as the king that magic itself had crowned. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.